Arthur is a tyrannical king who rules the world with an iron fist. During his rise to the throne, he massacred his enemies, destroyed cities with bombs, and committed countless atrocities in the name of power. However, one day he reflects on everything he has done and, consumed by a feeling of guilt, in the next moment suffers a heart attack and dies. As he descends into the abyss, a voice calls out to him and says that he will have a second chance at life, but must ensure that there will be no waste this time. After a few moments, Arthur opens his eyes and sees two people looking at him. The man introduces himself as Reynold, his father, and the woman as Alice, his mother. They do not expect a newborn to understand what they are saying, but are extremely excited to have him. Arthur slowly realizes that these people are indeed his parents and that he has just been born. It is still hard to believe that he has returned to being a baby, but he cannot deny that his parents take very good care of him. Overall, he is happy, but is still bothered by the fact that he is stuck in a baby's body. His head is disproportionately large and he cannot speak. Every few hours, he uncontrollably soils his diaper. However, he soon notices something even stranger than his current condition. He watches Reynold channeling energy into his fists and crushing a massive stone into pieces. Arthur is surprised, as he has never seen this type of power, even after years of ruling the world. This effect is so impressive that Reynold swells with pride and expects to receive compliments from the family. However, he is not paying attention to his surroundings and ends up getting hit by a stone that falls on his head. Alice had already anticipated that something like this might happen and quickly heals him using magic, warning him to be more careful the next time he wants to show off. Although Reynold was just trying to showcase his abilities, when he gets serious, his fists are lethal, as he can take down a wild boar with a single blow during hunting. His presence makes everything easier for his hunting companions. When the hunt is over, Reynold returns to the family, ready for a warm, welcome hug, but then remembers he is still covered in wild boar blood and needs to clean up first. Arthur learns two things from watching this. First, this world is so dangerous that it is common for people to have weapons to protect themselves. Second, if he wants to live freely, he will need to learn to fight. Now that Reynold has returned, Alice says it is time to put Arthur to sleep. Normally, he would be annoyed at being treated like a baby, but this is a part that he truly appreciates. In his previous life, he rarely had the chance to sleep peacefully, and there was always someone trying to assassinate him when he least expected it. Although he could easily defeat any enemy, the constant threat was stressful. Months go by, and Arthur's fragile limbs finally strengthen enough for him to move by himself. The first thing he does with this new mobility is go to a mirror to observe himself. His parents find it adorable how captivated he is with his own reflection, but in truth, Arthur is just assimilating the fact that he has truly returned to being a baby now that he can move on his own. When Alice puts him to sleep later that day, he puts his plan into action. As soon as she leaves the room, Arthur opens his eyes, throws the blanket out of the crib, and begins to climb it to escape. He crawls on the floor while Alice is busy washing the dishes. She seems so focused that she doesn't notice Arthur crossing the room. Upon reaching the other side, he opens the door to the house's library and picks up a book. He needs to learn more about this world. Arthur discovers that the continent is called Dick and is divided into 3 kingdoms. The kingdom of Cald, inhabited by dwarves who live in underground cities. The kingdom of Eleanor, where elves dwell in the depths of the forests. And the kingdom of Sapim, ruled by a human king. In this world, no one destroyed cities to conquer territories, but Arthur still wants to understand more about his new home. He picks up another book and finally obtains some answers. Arthur realizes that the technological level of this world is primitive, and the reason for this is the existence of magic. People can use magic by manipulating the mana within their bodies, and although it is not a common occurrence, magic plays a fundamental role in daily life. There are 2 ways to use it: enhancement and conjuration. Enhancement involves circulating mana through the body, granting superhuman strength, endurance, and agility, while conjurers project mana outward and use it to control external phenomena. This knowledge summarizes the magical system of the world well, but Arthur finds nothing about the healing magic that Alice used earlier. He deduces that she must be an exception. From what Arthur understands, most people manifest their mana during puberty. By channeling it through something called a manacore, they can learn to control it and become a mage. This makes sense to him, as in his previous life, he ascended to power thanks to the innate energy of his body that worked exactly like mana. Determined to test if he can use this energy, he concentrates intensely and, to his surprise, feels the development of a mana core within himself. This is a significant breakthrough for him, since he discovered that he was no longer in the cradle. Alice was relieved that he was unhurt. However, when she picked him up in her arms, she noticed something different about him. Arthur was worried, thinking that she might have sensed the mana inside him, but in reality, Alice only noticed that he had gotten dirty again. 2 years passed. Alice was writing in her diary. She was very grateful that Arthur was growing strong and healthy, but she began to worry because she had never seen her son smile since birth. Then, she noticed Reynold and Arthur outside, and it seemed like Reynold was giving sword lessons to Arthur. The boy looked quite interested, but Alice was furious to see Reynold allowing a mere 2-year-old to swing a dangerous stick. Arthur had already realized that upsetting Alice was not a good idea, so he knew he would have to be careful not to infuriate her. To prevent him from engaging in other dangerous activities, Alice decided to take Arthur on a walk through the city. Arthur was particularly excited about this opportunity, as it would allow him to gather valuable information about the world. He could assess the technological level of the kingdom by observing the weapons sold to the general public, and also came into contact with substances he had never seen before. But the best part was witnessing a mage conjuring fire magic up close. In the end, the day's trip was incredibly valuable to him. By the end of the day, Arthur's infant body, he was exhausted from all the activity and could barely stay awake. Alice wanted to put him to sleep as soon as they got home. Despite the limitations of this new life, Arthur began to enjoy living with loving parents. In his past life, he was left to his own devices with no help. He grew up in an orphanage and never experienced parental love. Having dedicated parents was a pleasant change for him. Arthur soon fell asleep on Alice's shoulder, who started to carry him to the crib. On the way, she told him how proud she was of him for learning so much. Alice knew about all the times he escaped the crib to read books, and realized how excited he became when he saw the outside world. For her, this meant that Arthur had an adventurous spirit, likely inherited from Reynold. Sooner or later, he would certainly want to leave to explore the world personally. Alice preferred him to lead a peaceful life. If he were happy, she would support him no matter what happened. The next day, Arthur was standing by the window watching as Reynold began his training in the yard. He was interested in seeing magic applied up close, so he watched attentively as Reynold started to circulate mana through his own body. Eventually, some stones began to rise from the ground, and Reynold seemed quite pleased with this, but in reality, the result was rather mediocre. This was the limit of Reynold's conjuration skills, as his specialty was enhancement magic, being much more effective when applied to his own body. Seeing his father's power motivated Arthur to train, and he was about to get off the table when Alice announced that it was nap time. Arthur still couldn't speak, so he began to complain as they passed the bookshelf. Alice, however, said there was no time for reading as he needed to sleep. Usually there was nothing Arthur could do about it, but he had recently learned a legendary technique: pouting. He mastered the art of using his cuteness as a weapon, and even though Alice still wanted to put him to sleep, she eventually relented and let him read a book. Once he was alone, Arthur began to practice with his mana. Over the past 2 years, he had made considerable progress. By gathering small fragments of mana within his own body, he managed to form a mana core, although it was incredibly exhausting. The effort was worth it. Now, with just a little more effort, he should be able to cast his first spell. However, Arthur drastically underestimated the strength of his own magic and accidentally blew up the house. Alice and Reynold were outside when the explosion occurred. It was so intense that Reynold's back was severely burned, but aside from that, both were fine. However, they soon realized that Arthur was still inside the house when it exploded. Desperate, they ran inside to check if he was still alive. There was no way a baby could have survived an explosion of that magnitude, but upon reaching the library, Reynold was shocked to see that Arthur was not only completely unharmed, but had also been the cause of the explosion. He was only 3 years old, so theoretically, it shouldn't be possible to use magic before the age of 12, so Arthur was practically a master of mana already. He looked proudly at his parents, but forgot that the house was collapsing when 2 ceiling beams began to fall. He was taken completely by surprise. He tried to run, but his short baby legs betrayed him, and it seemed like his end had come. Fortunately, both Alice and Reynold rushed to save him. While Alice shielded him with her own body, Reynold used magic to block the debris and save them both. Arthur was surprised, as it was the first time someone risked their life for him. Alice, on the other hand, was so relieved that she started to cry. Arthur was still not used to having people care about him, so seeing her cry for him made him cry too. He could never have done something like that in his previous life, as he was expected to be a ruthless king. At one point, a man attempted to assassinate Arthur. After he was captured, the entire council convened and prepared to sentence him for his crimes. Moreover, they planned to send the man's wife and child to a camp that had never heard of the Geneva Convention, meaning they were condemned to be tortured and used as test subjects in experiments to kill. You know why? Because why not? The man starts begging Arthur to spare his family, as they don't deserve to suffer for his actions. As an act of mercy, Arthur decided to kill him right there. This was basically a regular Monday for him at that time. but now he spends his Mondays training with his father. Reynold wants Arthur to practice with gauntlets, but Arthur already has a lifetime of experience with swords, so he doesn't want to switch his main weapon. Since Arthur is so determined to use a sword, Reynold decides to use one too to make things more interesting. However, to his complete surprise, Arthur does exactly the same thing and easily cuts through Reynold's sword. Upon seeing this, Reynold realizes that Arthur is too talented for him to continue training the boy, so he starts considering the idea of hiring a professional teacher and goes to talk to Alice about it. Alice immediately rejects the idea, as she cannot stand the thought of sending Arthur off to some random city, just for him to learn something. They had already discussed this. Reynold should teach Arthur to fight while she would teach him about magic. But Reynold points out that Arthur managed to cut his sword during training, even with it being infused with mana, and the boy is still just a baby for God's sake. He's already doing things like that at such a young age. Who knows what he'll be capable of in the future? Therefore, Reynold thinks it's important for him to have a real teacher. Alice cannot deny that Arthur is incredibly talented, but she still hates the idea of leaving him alone in a city school. So she and Reynold start to argue for a few minutes without reaching an agreement. Arthur is already tired of so much discussion, so he points out that they can simply go with him to the city. That way he can have a teacher and his parents won't have to leave him alone. The two had not realized that this was an option, but it solves all their problems. So they find the idea great and immediately start preparing for the trip. The next day, a carriage arrives to take them to the city. They will travel with some old friends, and Arthur recognizes them. They are the same people who helped Alice and Reynold rebuild the house after it exploded. They are part of a group called the Twin Horns. The leader, Adam, introduces himself. Arthur and Angela also introduce themselves at the same time while suffocating Arthur. In a hug that nearly makes him pass out, Alice happily observes everything. Luckily, before Arthur passes out, Adam pulls Angela away and introduces himself as well, but is much kinder and just gives the boy a high five. Well, Arthur then notices a girl standing on top of the carriage. It's clear she is trying to show off, as there is no reason to be on top of the carriage at that moment. She doesn't say anything, so the others tell Arthur that her name is Jasmine. The last member of the group is him, the archer. With the introductions finally completed, the group needs to continue their journey. Everyone gets on the carts and departs. On the way, Alice asks Arthur if he is excited about his first big trip. He answers yes, but inside he is thinking about how primitive this world is. They still use horse-drawn carriages to travel, while in Arthur's ancient world he had a fleet of flying cars he could use at any time. After traveling almost all day, the group decides to take a break for lunch, so they set up camp. But as soon as they stop, they are attacked by wolves. Despite that, the wolves are quite dumb, as they don't even try to surround the group. They just rush directly in. They are instantly taken down by the adventuring team. Arthur finds everything very interesting, as it's the first time he sees real combat in this world, and he intends to become strong enough to handle threats like this alone soon. Now, since there is plenty of wolf meat, the group decides to cook for dinner, but they are out of seasoning, so it will just be simple grilled meat. At this moment, Alice notices that Reynolds' arm is slightly injured and offers to heal him, but before she starts, Jasmine asks her to wait a little. Everyone gathers around Alice to keep watch because healers like her are extremely rare in this world. If someone saw her using healing magic, she could become a target. When Alice finishes healing Reynold, everyone goes back to what they were doing before. But Adam decides he wants to get some exercise before sleeping, and there's no better way to do that than by fighting a 4-year-old. It seems like a cruel attitude, but Adam has heard about Arthur's strength and wants to see it for himself. It's just a training session. Adam tells Arthur to get ready and already imbues his spear with mana. Arthur does the same. When the duel begins, Arthur channels a bit of magic to his feet. Thus, just as he is about to collide with Adam, he disappears and reappears behind him. This would have been the perfect chance for Arthur to attack, but his child-sized feet slip on the ground. He loses his balance, and Adam manages to recover. Arthur and Adam start to face off, but it's noticeable that the animation budget was negative. In any case, Arthur ends up being thrown back, as his child body is too light to keep up with an experienced adventurer and gets launched into the air. Fortunately, the others save him before he hits the ground, and everyone begins to yell at Adam for almost hurting Arthur. But Adam says he couldn't hold back, as Arthur was too strong for him to contain. There was no way a child of that caliber could be that strong, so he thinks Reynold must be doing some kind of super soldier training with him. However, in reality, Reynold never taught any of that to Arthur. He learned everything on his own. At that moment, Jasmine approaches Arthur and accidentally scares him. She was really impressed with Arthur's fight and asked him to teach her how to do that thing with magic in her feet. Arthur wanted to keep the technique a secret since it was something he mastered in his past life, but she wouldn't take no for an answer, and from her expression, he knew she would insist until he caved. so he might have to teach her eventually. The next morning, the journey continued as planned, and along the way, they made some stops to rest. During these breaks, Adam gave some basic spear lessons to Arthur, and he taught him how to use a bow. A few minutes later, with some basic lessons, Arthur quickly understood. The only knowledge about weapons that Arthur had from his past life was with the sword, so these lessons were very valuable to him. Arthur was learning so much from others that he decided to teach his technique to Jasmine. After all, by channeling magic in the feet and using wind magic at the same time, it was possible to increase speed impressively. After demonstrating once, Jasmine managed to replicate it perfectly. Later, Arthur was reading a magic book in the carriage, but for some reason Jasmine was also there, just watching. It wasn't a coincidence, as she took every opportunity to get closer to him. The next morning, Jasmine gave Arthur a knife as a thank you for teaching him, and it was clear that she really liked him, as she usually didn't interact with anyone intentionally. A few minutes later, everyone returned to their carriages and continued the journey, but while Arthur was reading his book, the carriage was attacked by bandits and was completely surrounded, with nowhere to go. The bandit leader ordered his men to capture the women and children to sell them as slaves. Then, they all attacked at once, and the adventurers did their best to hold them back. In terms of brute strength, the Horn twins and Reynold were much stronger than the common bandits, but there were so many of them that they would eventually be overwhelmed. At one point, Reynold was thrown back into the carriage by the bandit leader and was seriously injured. Alice wanted to go heal him, but Reynold stopped her, saying that if the bandits discovered her power, they would start chasing her. So he asked Arthur to take Alice as far away as possible. Arthur didn't want to leave Reynold behind, but he explained that Alice was pregnant with another child, so protecting her was the top priority. Arthur understood. When Reynold signaled, he prepared his magic to flee with Alice while Reynold promised to hold the bandits off. The bandit leader ordered his men to chase Arthur and Alice, but Reynold didn't let them and charged at him. The first time, the leader had knocked him down easily, but now Reynold was fighting for his family, so he wouldn't fall so easily. While Reynold held the leader, some lesser bandits tried to reach Arthur and Alice. Adam and Jasmine threw daggers at them and cleared a path for them to escape. Everyone was doing their best to keep the bandits away from Arthur, and he was striving to get Alice to safety. It was ironic. In his past life, he took what he wanted without caring about others. Now he was fleeing to protect someone precious. After running for several minutes, Arthur thought he was far enough away, but he was wrong. A bandit was watching from the top of a cliff and knew how to use magic. He cast a wind spell against Arthur and Alice. Arthur did not perceive it in time, and by the time he noticed, it was too late. He could only push Alice away and take the hit alone. Dragged, he was thrown back and fell off the cliff. With his child's body, this was practically a death sentence, but if he were to die, he would not die alone. As he fell, Arthur grabbed the knife he received from Jasmine and threw it at the magical villain. The blade struck, and the cord wrapped around the enemy's ankle, allowing Arthur to pull him down together. The adventurers tried to use magic to save Arthur, but he was already too far away to be reached. He was doomed. During the fall, Arthur reflected on his life. Even at the brink of death, he felt a strange peace as he managed to protect his family. He now understood why that man from his past life had been so desperate to protect his own. Arthur did not hesitate to sacrifice himself for Alice, and although he did not regret what he did, he still wished he had survived to live a little longer with them. After that fatal fall, Arthur somehow manages to get out of the river and find a cave. However, he encounters a terrifying monster and begins to regret seeking shelter there. He attempts a surprise attack to increase his chances of survival, but the monster simply strikes the air and tells him to calm down. "A monster," says Arthur, who is not evil and just wants to be friends. In any case, he is still severely injured, and his wounds will not heal unless he eats something. The monster starts picking fruits from the cave wall and tells Arthur to eat them, but he does not trust random wall fruits. He is about to get up to try to escape that situation, but his injuries finally catch up to him. As he tries to get up, he hears something crack and starts to cry. The monster tells him to stop crying, because it is already a miracle that he survived that fall. Arthur has many questions to ask, but the monster says it will not answer anything unless he eats the fruits. He hesitates at first, but after taking a bite of the first little fruit, Arthur realizes that they taste very good. After stuffing himself, Arthur turns to the monster and asks if it knows anything about the current state of his parents. The monster explains that it cannot leave the cave, so it cannot check for itself, but it has an ability that allows it to see long distances. It generates a screen and shows Arthur that his parents managed to defeat the rest of the bandits. This means they are still alive and well, and Arthur could not be happier with this news. He He thanks the monster for letting him know that his parents are okay, and since Arthur will be trapped there for a while, he decides to be friendly with it. The monster's name is Sylvia, and she turns out to be a very kind person. In the following days, Arthur stayed there, eating and resting so that his wounds could heal. Throughout this time, Sylvia took care of him. When his body finally recovers, Arthur wants to return home as quickly as possible. According to Sylvia, Arthur would never survive the trip back alone. The cave is currently around the Elven Forest, an area full of magical beasts and bandits, and Arthur simply cannot deal with all that. But that does not mean he will be trapped there forever. Sylvia has the ability to open a dimensional rift and can send Arthur back home, or at least to a safer place than that forest. However, it will take quite some time for her to create that rift, so Arthur will have to wait. With nothing better to do, he picks up a branch and begins practicing his fencing skills. Several days go by, and although Arthur has come to enjoy Sylvia's company, he still hasn't learned anything about her. All he knows is that she looks like a frightening monster, is apparently hiding from something, and is a very kind person. After finishing his sword training for the day, Arthur sits on a rock to start training his mana. Sylvia is impressed that such a young child already has a mana core, but is sure he has never learned to do that properly. She extends her hand, and a large amount of mana starts to accumulate there. Arthur is amazed, as Sylvia is basically gathering mana while casting her spell. If Arthur can learn this, he will undoubtedly become incredibly strong. That said, even before Sylvia offers to teach him, she asks Arthur what he intends to do with the power he will gain from learning this technique. Arthur had considered this before, but now that he thinks about it more, he remembers how his family and friends were almost completely slaughtered by bandits. For that reason, he tells Sylvia he will use his power to destroy anyone who dares to hurt his family. However, Sylvia does not like this answer. She flicks Arthur on the forehead and pushes him back. Sylvia says she would never teach her technique to someone who thinks that way. Arthur, on the other hand, does not understand why she is so upset. After all, it seems perfectly natural to want to kill your enemies. Sylvia wants to prove a point, so she raises her finger to Arthur's head and says she could easily open his skull with a simple touch, or she could touch him gently. She asks Arthur which he prefers, and obviously, he says he prefers the gentle touch, as he does not want to die. It is easy to let actions be driven by anger and hatred, but once you give in to that, your life becomes a vacant and endless cycle of hate. Sylvia does not want Arthur to waste his life like that, so she asks again, "What will you do with that power?" Arthur thinks again, but this time focuses on the bright smiles of the people close to him, and then responds that he wants to use his power to protect those he loves. Sylvia likes this answer much better. Meanwhile, outside the cave, a monster that looks quite a bit like Sylvia seems to be tracking her and is very close to finding her. In Arthur's old world, he was the king, but that did not mean he held all the power. The ones truly in charge were the senators. Arthur was basically a war agent, summoned whenever the senators needed him to commit unspeakable acts of violence, but he never liked living like that. Back to the present, Sylvia is teaching Arthur to use her technique. After showing him how it's done, she asks him to try on his own. However, Arthur starts to condense the mana from the air around him. Once he gets the hang of it, he can use that mana to strengthen himself. He already feels the difference in his strength, so he runs to Sylvia to thank her for teaching him. However, Sylvia suddenly senses someone approaching, then pushes Arthur into a pile of rocks and tells him to be quiet. Arthur has no idea what is happening, so he takes a peek and sees another monster, which looks exactly like Sylvia. Sylvia seems to know him and is surprised that he managed to find her there, but the second monster doesn't want to waste time and demands that Sylvia go with him. Sylvia refuses, so he immediately starts to attack. Arthur wants to help Sylvia, but he hears her voice in his head telling him not to worry about her. Another monster tries to convince Sylvia to cooperate, saying that otherwise he will be forced to kill her. But Sylvia would rather die than obey, so she begins to gather mana and reveals her true form. It turns out that Sylvia is a dragon, and in this form she can use much more power than before. She unleashes a massive blast at the other monster, which blocks the attack. However, he says that she is being foolish, as in her current state, her body will not survive using so much power. Sylvia is well aware that she will likely die because of this, but she doesn't care because she has lived a long and happy life. She manages to push the other monster against the wall, but he is still not out of the fight and rises again, ready to attack. Several explosions hit Sylvia. She suffers a lot of damage from these attacks, but at that moment, she is more concerned about Arthur than herself, because the fight is dangerously close to where she hit him. The other monster launches another attack against her, and as she cannot dodge without hitting Arthur, Sylvia uses all her power to intercept the attack and temporarily stop time. While time is frozen, She calls Arthur to come out of his hiding place. He obeys, as it seems safe, and he wants to ask questions about everything that is happening, especially about the fact that she is a dragon. But there is no time for that now. The power to stop time will soon run out, and she needs to get Arthur out of there as soon as possible. Sylvia opens the dimensional rift she was preparing, but due to her injuries and the lack of time to finalize the spell, the portal ends up connecting to an unknown place instead of Arthur's home. She wanted to avoid sending him to the forest because it is dangerous, but she has no choice. In any case, she believes that Arthur can survive on his own and find his way back with the technique she taught him, so she is no longer worried about his safety. She then asks him again what he intends to use his power for. Arthur, without hesitation, answers that he will only use it to protect his family. Sylvia is pleased with this answer, as she understands that he will not use the power selfishly. Before he leaves, there are a few things she wants to give him. She forms an egg and a feather before Arthur, asking him to wrap the egg with the feather and take good care of it as a farewell gift. Sylvia also imprints her will on Arthur's body in the form of markings on his arms. Arthur is confused when he realizes he has gained tattoos covering his arms completely, but Sylvia no longer has the strength to explain. She just says that one day he will understand how to use this power, even though she will no longer be present to teach him. Sylvia also apologizes to Arthur, revealing that she could have teleported him back to his family from the very beginning, but she enjoyed his presence so much that she didn't want it to end. Because of this, she ended up putting him in danger with her selfish decision. Arthur feels terrible because he knows he doesn't have enough power to save Sylvia from death, despite everything she has done. For him, he doesn't care if she is a dragon or not. Monster, for him, she is a precious part of his family. He tells her that he sees her as a mother, but Sylvia reminds him that he already has a mother. Then, Arthur says she can be his grandmother. Sylvia didn't expect this, but she loves the idea of being called grandmother and asks him to repeat it. He does so with joy. Sylvia is sad that she can't see him again, but time is running out. Then, she gently pushes him to cross the portal. Arthur understands, grabs the presents she gave him, and steps in, but at the last second he changes his mind and tries to convince her to go with him. However, she cannot do that, so she closes the portal and sends him away. Time starts moving again, and Sylvia is hit by the attack from the other monster. The damage is fatal. She falls to the ground, but the monster doesn't believe she is dead, as he knows she is too powerful to be defeated so easily. He approaches cautiously, but lowers his guard upon seeing the motionless body. As he gets close, Sylvia gathers all her remaining energy and unleashes an attack that strikes him along with everything around in a 1-meter radius. As Arthur is being teleported, he hears one last message from Sylvia. She asks if he remembers what she said about the correct use of power, and Arthur replies yes, although he is still sad about everything that happened. Sylvia says the world is a sad place, and things like that will happen from time to time. That's why Arthur needs to change it for the better. Arthur protests, saying he doesn't have the capacity for such a thing, but Sylvia doesn't expect him to change the world all at once. He can start small, after all. This isn't the first time he has tried to control the world. Sylvia knows about Arthur's past life as a king, and although she disagrees with how he ruled back then, she is sure that if he doesn't let hatred consume him, he can become a great king who will make the world a better place. After a while, Arthur wakes up on the ground and swears he will fulfill Sylvia's request, but before that, he needs to find a way out of that forest. After being teleported to the elven forest, Arthur begins his journey back home, but as he walks, he suddenly hears a terrifying scream coming from the other side of the woods. It sounds like the scream of a little girl. Immediately, he focuses the mana in his feet and starts running to see what is happening. He jumps to the top of a tall tree to get a good vantage point. From up there, he clearly sees a group of bandits kidnapping a girl. She tries to escape, but the bandits have already grabbed her and cover her mouth to prevent her from continuing to scream. Since the girl is an elf, the bandits plan to sell her as a slave on the black market for a good profit as soon as they leave the forest. So, they tie up the girl and put her in the back of the cart. As Arthur watches everything happen, he has flashbacks of the moment when he and his family were also attacked by bandits. He remembers hearing the bandits talk about keeping him alive along with the women to sell them as slaves later, and this angers him deeply. His first impulse is to massacre all the bandits for committing such a horrible crime, but he remembers what Sylvia told him about controlling his anger. So, he takes a deep breath and tries to calm down. Arthur understands that if he attacked at that moment, he could put the girl's life at risk. That's why he decides to be patient and wait for the right chance to act. All the bandits get into the cart and start leaving the forest, and Arthur follows them closely through the shadows as night falls. The bandits are forced to stop to rest and set up camp, as they cannot travel in the dark. Arthur wonders if he should continue following them until they reach a human city, or if he should attack them right there. But hearing one of the bandits say that their favorite race is elves, Arthur realizes he cannot leave them alone with the girl any longer. Still, he needs to wait until it is completely dark before acting. So, he sits down and begins to meditate to prepare himself mentally for the bloodbath that is about to come. As soon as it is dark enough, Arthur opens his eyes and starts planning the attack. He notices that the bandits have a group of wolves with horns tied by collars, and finds it strange that the wolves obey humans so easily. Upon closer observation, he sees that the animals are wearing magical collars that force them to obey. Arthur decides to use this to his advantage and throws some stones at the wolves to agitate them. The bandits hear the howls, and the leader sends one of them to shut the mouths of the damn beasts. The bandit stands up and kicks one of the wolves in the neck to make it stop barking. At that moment, with the enemy distracted, Arthur seizes the opportunity. First, he conjures a mana blade and leaps behind the bandit. In seconds, he is already dead from a single blow. Arthur takes his weapon, and when the other bandit comes to see what is happening, Arthur jumps on his back and cuts his throat. 2 bandits are dead, but Arthur's body is starting to feel fatigued, so he needs to act quickly. Another bandit approaches to see why the previous 2 are taking so long. Arthur tries to kill him quickly as well, but unfortunately, he misses the vital organs. The man screams and alerts the others to Arthur's presence. The leader of the bandits realizes that Arthur is a mage, so he knows it will not be an easy fight, but he also does not want to kill him, because selling a mage boy in the black market would fetch even more than the elf. The leader begins to channel magic in his arms and attacks Arthur. Arthur jumps back and tries to counterattack with a kick, but the bandit is able to dodge. Then he tries to surprise him by throwing a knife, but the bandit catches it in midair and uses it against him. As a result, Arthur is thrown to the ground, and the bandit lifts him by the ankles to mock him, saying that Arthur stands no chance against an adult in terms of strength. Arthur realizes he is right, so he decides to attack with magic. Now he casts a fireball directly at the bandit's knee. As the man screams in pain, Arthur stabs him in the head with the knife. Now, only the previously wounded bandit remains. After he is also killed, Arthur rushes to check on the girl's situation in the cart. The girl has been blindfolded the entire time and has no idea what happened. Arthur reassures her, saying that all the bandits have been defeated. She is safe now. Her name is Tessia. When Arthur helps her out of the cart, he tells her that she can go home, but Teacha notices a bit of blood on Arthur's hand and worries about him. Arthur understands that it is natural for children to be frightened by seeing blood, so he concludes that it would not be a good idea to let her see the bodies spread across the ground and asks her to wait a bit while he goes to cover the corpses with a tarp. Teacha asks what happened to the kidnappers, and Arthur does not want to admit that he killed them, so he simply says that they suffered an accident. That does not bother her anymore. The girl does not ask any more questions. Arthur takes her belongings from the bandit's cart and says goodbye, but he needs to continue his journey. However, Tessia grabs his arm and begs him to stay because she is afraid of being left alone. If Arthur leaves her there, she might be devoured by the ghosts of the trees or something like that. He asks if she knows the way back, and she says yes, but she doesn't know how long it will take to reach her village. Arthur doesn't like the idea of taking a detour, but he knows that Tessia wouldn't survive alone, so he agrees to escort her home. He looks at the wolves captured by the bandits and even considers using them as transport, but since he doesn't know how to control wolves, he decides to leave them behind. Arthur insists that at least they should remove the magic collars from the wolves so that they can return to the forest. Arthur warns that the wolves might attack as soon as the collars are removed, but she believes she will be fine since she hasn't done anything to anger them. Besides, as a forest dweller, it's her duty to take care of the creatures living there. She ends up taking the collars off the wolves, and as expected, they simply return peacefully to the forest. The next morning, Arthur and Tessia head towards the elf village and, after a while, take a break to eat. Arthur prepares a simple stew and says she needs to eat to have energy for the long journey. Tessia comments that the smell is strange, and Arthur admits that he's not exactly a master cook. The dish is made only with dried meat and salt, so the taste isn't the best, but it's better than being hungry. Tessia asks why Arthur came to the Elshire forest, as it's rare for humans to appear there, especially a child alone. Arthur explains how he got separated from his family and ended up at that place. They continue talking, and he asks what it's like to live in the kingdom of Eleanor. One day, Tessia says she loves the place. Even though her parents are always busy with work, she spends most of her time with her grandfather and her maid and continues on her journey. But since Tessia doesn't know exactly how far the village is, it's hard to predict how much longer it will take. To make matters worse, the wolves Tessia freed started following them, and Arthur regrets not having killed them from the start. That night, Arthur decides to stand guard outside the tent to protect Tessia from a possible wolf attack. After a while, Tessia opens the tent and asks him to sleep beside her. Arthur says he isn't sleepy and prefers to keep watch outside, but Tessia pleads, saying she is afraid of being alone. Arthur relents and decides to take his watch inside the tent for her. Despite pretending she isn't scared, she insists that Arthur stays by her side the whole time. Before sleeping, Tessia asks if it's true that all humans are perverts and marry several wives. Arthur is shocked by the question and wants to know where she heard that. Tessia replies that it was her grandfather who said it. Arthur admits that such people exist, especially in the Gerite family, but that, generally speaking, humans are modest. Then Tessia believes him and falls asleep. Shortly after, the wolves do not attack. In the morning, the two continue their journey. Tessia is getting closer to Arthur now that she has managed to forget the slave traders. She seems much happier. However, she is still completely without survival skills and can't even cross a stream by herself. Arthur has to carry her. Suddenly, Arthur feels a strange, pulsing pain in his chest. Unaware of what is happening to him, Tessia runs to find medicinal herbs that may help, but Arthur feels it is not a common illness. While leaning against a tree, the previous wolf appears, and Arthur panics as he is unable to fight. Tessia returns with the herbs, and Arthur warns her to stay away, fearing that the wolf might be dangerous. To his surprise, the animal simply leaves a dead pig in front of him and departs. Arthur is bewildered, but Tessia assumes the wolf was trying to thank him for his previous help. That night, they camp and roast meat over the fire. The taste is much better than that of the stew, and Tessia, while searching for herbs, found some mushrooms and offers them to Arthur, but he probably shouldn't have accepted them. The mushrooms cause quite a bout of diarrhea. After relieving himself, Arthur is exhausted and almost faints. But Tessia keeps talking. She shares that her grandfather used to read storybooks about the realms of humans and dwarves, and that she always wanted to visit those places, but she was never allowed because elves do not trust other races. At that moment, Tessia realizes that Arthur is not paying attention, but understands that he is just sleepy, so she covers him with the blanket and wishes him good night. The next morning, they resume their journey, but Arthur's chest pain worsens. Tessia apologizes for not being able to help, but he says it's nothing serious. Changing the subject, Tessia asks if she can call him Gart, as she already considers him a friend. After all, they have spent a lot of time together and have grown quite close. Arthur says he doesn't mind and agrees to be her friend. Tessia is surprised by his calm reaction. Arthur then makes a joke, saying he will cherish every moment that Tessia's great law considers him a friend. But this annoys her. She tells him to stop acting like a child. Arthur finds it funny since it was she who insisted that he stay by her side the whole time because she was scared. Tessia responds that it was totally different. Joking aside, Arthur realizes that Tessia is his first true friend. Not even in his past life did he have that. People have always been afraid of him, and he never could call someone a friend. Suddenly, Tessia sees something familiar and calls Arthur to look. He goes expecting to find some strange branch or something like that, but comes across a huge tree with a portal at its center. Arthur explains to her that this is the entrance to the elven village and extends his hand to her, inviting her to go with him. The guards demand that Arthur explain who allowed a human like him to enter their sacred lands. Arthur turns to Tessia, hoping she will clarify the situation, but seeing her silent, he feels betrayed, thinking himself foolish for ever considering her a friend. However, the truth is that Tessia was afraid to intervene because she was still a child. When the guards announce that they will execute Arthur, she finally intervenes, defending him and stating that he saved her life. Even so, the guards maintain the assumption that Arthur had mentally manipulated the girl into believing this, as if it were possible. Anyway, the only wise and sensible man of the elven lands appears coming out of the same teleportation portal and orders them to release Arthur. This man is Vera Elite, the former king of Eleanor, and he personally thanks Arthur for saving Tessia, revealing that she is his granddaughter, which means she is the princess of that kingdom. Arthur is completely shocked by the revelation, as he would have never imagined that Tessia was royalty, judging by her behavior during the time they were together. Tessia's parents, King Alvin and Queen Marielle, arrive moments later and finally reunite with their missing daughter after days of separation. While Marielle checks if her daughter is okay, Aldo questions what a human is doing there. It seems Aldo inherited his mother's traits and is not nearly as wise as his father, as he immediately orders his soldiers to execute Arthur. Arthur turns to intervene once again, declaring that he was the one who ordered the guards to stand down. He explains how Arthur saved the precious Tessia, even being considered a barbaric human. children. Tessia reinforces her grandfather's words, pleading with her father not to hurt her friend and even suggesting that they invite him to the castle. The idea of a human stepping into the castle clearly makes Aldo hesitate, but Tessia does not wait for the response and goes straight to Arthur, saying that if he agrees to go with her, the royal chefs will prepare his favorite snacks. Yes, this kind of bribery only works with small children. Well, Arthur is technically still a child, so it's all right. Aldo doesn't want to contradict his strong-willed daughter, so he ends up agreeing. Meanwhile, Vera's curiosity reaches its peak as he senses a mysterious power in Arthur, and therefore asks to speak with him privately later. For now, Arthur accompanies Tessia as they walk through the kingdom of Elenoa, an artistically structured society where houses are built both above and below the trees, and the people lead a simple yet peaceful life. As Arthur walks alongside Tessia, he attracts many curious glances from the crowd, all intrigued by the presence of a human in that place. Arthur cannot get over the fact that he had been terrified to help him at first. Why would she do that? And what was that stern expression on her face at that moment? He does not understand, and this thought continues to disturb him, provoking a sharp pain in his chest. In any case, he remains suspicious of everything around him and does his best to stay alert and not let his guard down. They arrive at the castle located at the end of the town. Upon entering, they are welcomed by dozens of elven maids, whose only function is to ensure that Tessia is always happy. However, today, Tessia wants to return the favor to Arthur. She orders all her maids to offer him the best hospitality possible, saying that he saved her life. Upon seeing their reluctance, Tessia assures them that Arthur is one of the rare, truly good-hearted humans. Then, she turns to Arthur and asks what he would like to do. Eat snacks, play, have lunch, or perhaps refresh himself. But before anything else, Arthur wants to talk to Tessia's parents about what happened in the forest. As there has been no explanation yet, he gathers everyone in the meeting room for a serious talk. Tessia, however, is, in her own little world and brings tea and snacks for everyone, perhaps thinking it's just an afternoon tea, nothing more. Anyway, Aldo introduces himself formally, along with his wife Mariel and his father Vera. Arthur also introduces himself as just an ordinary boy, born in a forgotten village in the kingdom of Sapem. He kneels before Aldo, admitting that a commoner like him would never have a chance to see royalty, much less sit in the same room as the king of the elves, and expresses how grateful he is to have received this opportunity. Aldo is surprised by how well-mannered Arthur is, despite claiming to be just a peasant, but allows him to continue. Arthur then gives a detailed explanation of what happened, including how he got separated from his family. He does not lie to the king, but he also does not tell the whole truth, such as his encounter with the mysterious dragon Sylvia. Still, he continues with his story to the point where he found Tessia being kidnapped by a group of slave traders, and the atmosphere in the room changes drastically. Once again, Aldo seizes the opportunity to blame all humanity for what the slave traders tried to do to his daughter. On the other hand, Viria asks the right question. How could a 5-year-old boy, Arthur, manage to rescue Tessia from 3 adult slave traders? It could not have been through negotiation or pleading. Then, Arthur finally reveals the truth. He claims to be a talented wizard and that he used his powers to eliminate the kidnappers. However, Aldo finds it hard to believe, and the same guard from before appears once again with his unwanted opinion, claiming that Arthur must have brainwashed Tessia just to be allowed into their sacred lands. Viria, who has been defending Arthur from the beginning, can no longer tolerate the indirect disrespect directed at him and immediately silences the guard. Tessia also intervenes, adding that she heard the slave traders discussing selling her for a high price, recalling the traumatic experience. After Tessia finishes reporting what she went through before being saved by Arthur, her mother becomes emotional and hugs her tightly. A mother's love is always so pure and moving. Aldo also realizes what his daughter went through, and for that reason, he tells Arthur that he believes him and thanks him for everything he did for her. After explaining how he met Tessia, Arthur gets straight to the point of why he requested that conversation. He said he is also separated from his family, and that all he desires at the moment is to reunite with his parents in Sapem. Aldo cannot believe what he hears. Arthur is indeed asking elves to help humans that they consider barbaric. Aldo insists that there is no chance of offering help to humans, and that Arthur needs to understand that he must find his own way back home. But Arthur, always intelligent, soon thinks of a way to argue. He reminds Aldo of everything he did for his family and his town, and says that if they do not repay the help after all he has done, then they too are barbarians and have no right to call themselves humans, as they are behaving the same way. Viria looks at Aldo with an expression that clearly says he was the nail. He declares that Aldo has fallen into his own trap. Tessia also stands by her father's side, looking directly at him, waiting to see what decision he will make. Aldo, with no way out, agrees to help Arthur, but informs him that the only teleportation portal leading to Saphem can only be opened once every 7 years, after a meeting between the 3 leaders. They used it recently, so the next opening will be in 5 years. Arthur does not have this time. He cannot wait 5 years to reunite with his family. Aldo realizes this and says he will send soldiers to escort him back. Thus, the journey will begin the following day. Arthur feels more relieved to hear this. However, his manicure starts to hurt again. He barely manages to leave the meeting and goes to take a shower. The pain doesn't go away and continues to throb. After the shower, he holds his chest tightly, trying to understand what is causing this pain and what the solution might be. He thinks of Sylvia and mentally asks her what he should do about the pain. Unfortunately, the answer won't come anytime soon. He goes out to walk around the palace, and the fresh air helps relieve the pain a bit. He thinks of his parents and how much he misses them. He wonders if they are still alive, but concludes that they are too strong to die so easily, so he believes they are fine. When he raises his eyes and sees Tessia, he begins to wonder if his family will welcome him with the same joy, or if they will be angry for him being away for so long. All these thoughts overwhelm the poor boy, who remains still, lost in his feelings. Tessia runs up to him. He teases her, calling her a spoiled princess, and tells her to enjoy the comfort of her parents. Arthur confides in Tessia his worries about his parents and whether he will be welcomed by them. She gently holds his face and is surprised by his insecurity. How could it be that his parents wouldn't be happy with his return? To her, parents always worry about their children. Surely his are distressed over his disappearance. As she comforts him, flowers known as chinabel start to fall around them. Tessia recognizes and comments on what they are, but Arthur Alvarez remembers the moment he entered the city and thought Tessia would betray him. However, he feels relieved that she didn't do that. Still, those flowers seem familiar in another way. What Tessia sees as flowers, he sees as weapons. He has seen them in past battles. Not fully understanding why, he apologizes to Tessia, who is confused and states that she also likes the flowers. She then throws one back, believing it to be a weapon thrown by someone. To her surprise, the sender is none other than Virium. Arthur confronts, asking why he would be attacking his own granddaughter, but Virium smirks disdainfully and questions whether anyone could truly be attacked by something so harmless. He runs up to Virium and pleads to leave Arthur alone, saying he is different from other humans and that he is a good person. She asks her grandfather to stop provoking him. However, Virium asserts that he is not provoking. To him, Arthur is the first interesting human he has ever seen, and therefore, he will not let him escape. With magic, he tests sitting and grabs a stick, challenging Arthur to a duel. The fight begins, and Arthur gives it his all. He uses all his human strength, but soon realizes that Virium is faster. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot land a single hit. In a more aggressive attempt, Virium breaks his stick, and a piece nearly hits Tessia. Arthur protects her just in time. He then decides to use magic, a powerful kind of magic that few can endure. Even so, Virium counters it. After several attempts, Arthur finally manages to hit Virium on the head. The elf, instead of getting irritated, becomes even more excited. He asks for a second round, but Tessia stands up and pokes her grandfather, asking him to leave her art alone. Virium retorts that Arthur is not the innocent boy she thinks he is. In fact, it was Arthur who provoked him and almost defeated him. Arthur rejects this kind of recognition, saying that Virium is overestimating his abilities. Virium then makes an unexpected request, that Arthur become his disciple. Arthur considers the idea, which seems advantageous. However, thinking of his parents and the fact that they do not know if he is well, he hesitates regarding his concern. Virium states that there is a way to inform his parents that he is well, without having to return home immediately. Arthur is interested, but before he receives explanations, Virium releases an energy into his body. He feels pain in his human form again, and Virium confirms his suspicion. Arthur has received the will of the beast. The only way to survive and avoid death is to become Virium's disciple. Arthur finds himself in a state where he cannot move. His heart aches with a sharp pain, and while trying to contain this pain, a dark aura escapes from his chest. It takes the form of a mysterious and frightening being. Arthur, afraid, closes his eyes, wondering if that creature is a manifestation of his inner anxieties or perhaps of his responsibilities. When the monster approaches, about to hurt him, a weak voice calls him. It is Tessia. Her voice calms his heart enough for him to awaken. Upon opening his eyes, Arthur finds Tessia sitting on him. Tessia wishes him a good day. day, but he ignores her and pretends to go back to sleep, calling her a monster from his dream. Joking aside, Tessia informs him that their grandfather is waiting for him outside, but Arthur does not pay attention. Then she drags him out of bed, telling him to fix his messy hair. Arthur responds by saying that her hair looked like Medusa's just seconds ago. While he changes clothes, Tessia asks if he is really going to stay there, and Arthur replies that he hasn't decided yet, calling her princess. Tessia, irritated by the formality, pinches him on the back and says she will be very angry if he calls her princess again. Arthur comments that she is already angry, and which makes him wonder if she can get even more furious than she is now. After getting ready, Arthur leaves the castle with Tessia and sees a carriage, where Alvin begs Virium not to allow Arthur to stay there. Alvin and his wife Marielle have an irrational prejudice against all humans, as we already know, but Virium ignores them and enters the carriage, making it clear that he likes Arthur and that his decision is final. Tessia hears Alvin and once again defends Arthur, saying that he should be allowed to stay there since he saved her life. Alvin responds, admitting that he is grateful, but not enough to allow a human to spread his filth in sacred lands. First, Virion gets angry with someone's words and tells his son to shut up. After all, he is the king and should have more sense. Next, Virion orders Arthur and Tessia to get into the carriage already. Shortly after, they leave for the place where an old friend of Virion lives. She falls asleep on Arthur's shoulder and asks him to let her sleep, explaining that she woke up early because that is an important day that will decide Arthur's future. Virium laments that his granddaughter has lived in a lonely environment until now, and the reason she does not have friends is that everyone has tried to exploit her. Thus, Tessia has kept her distance from people. Hearing all of this, Arthur understands why Tessia gets irritated when he treats her. Formally as a princess, Virium would come before Tessia only truly smiles when she is with Arthur and thanks him for being her friend, making Arthur realize how much she values him. Arthur notices how Virium is a kind man and decides to fully trust him from now on. Soon, the carriage arrives at the destination and leaves them in front of a house that looks like Frodo's house from The Lord of the Rings. Arthur wonders who owns that mysterious house and why someone so important had the former king visit him in person. Virium, acting like royalty the whole time, suddenly behaves like an ordinary old man, banging on the door and calling the lady of the house an old witch. With no response, he leans his ear against the door to listen, but is surprised when it suddenly swings open, knocking him to the ground. The old woman says she can hear perfectly well and doesn't need him to shout in her ears. Virium gets up and introduces Renia to the lady as Arthur and Tessia's queen of Arcase. According to Virium, the queen is a special sorceress powerful enough to grant Arthur's wish. Arthur feels relieved to hear this and says it is an honor to meet someone like her. Renia likes the young man's manners and invites them in. Arthur looks around the place and only finds a bucket of water, then asks how she intends to help him communicate with his parents if there is no communication equipment around. She explains that she is a seer, a type of sorceress who can see fragments of someone's past and future. She tries to demonstrate her powers on Arthur and is surprised when she cannot see much, calling Arthur someone special. He tells Renia that he does not want to know his future. He just wishes to somehow tell his parents that he is alive and they should not worry about him. Renia agrees and asks Arthur to look at the reflection of the water in the bucket, shattering it as he focuses on thinking about his parents. While doing this, she then uses her magical powers on him. Thus, Arthur is able to see his mother, Alice, and his father, the king, having lunch together, still mourning for him, mentioning that today would have been his birthday. Both remember the unfortunate incident where they lost Arthur and how they still haven't been able to move on, even after settling in the city. The king joined the city's security force and began living in a mansion with Alice, taking care of her and the baby in her belly. While they cry thinking of Arthur, he finally speaks to them, saying that he is alive and well, and that he is currently in the land of the elves. He explains that he is speaking to them through a special type of magic, and also mentions that he cannot return yet, as there is something wrong with his body that needs to be fixed, but he asks them not to worry, promising that he will be fine. He pleads with them not to blame themselves for what happened that day, ending the communication by saying that he loves them. Alice hugs the king, emotional to know that their son is alive. Arthur's eyes are filled with tears. He does not want to see his parents in such a miserable state anymore, so he vows to become competent enough to never cause that kind of suffering again, asking Virium to accept him as a disciple. But his determination to train is not easily accepted, given that Alvin and Marielle do not agree with the idea of him staying with them. A human in the Elven City is not a reason for celebration. Virium and Tessia will meet up again with Alvin. Tessia tries to convince her father, saying that the boy they are rejecting saved his life twice. If they insist and do not accept him, they will be setting the precedent that elves repay good with evil. Alvin does not care about that. His duty is to protect his people's interests, and he fears that the citizens will not accept. Arthur, Virium also intervenes. He has never had a disciple before, so he tells Alvin that if he is asking for Arthur as a disciple, it is because he trusts that the boy is good. With little choice, due to his affection for the father and daughter, Alvin agrees to let Arthur stay, but he still has a concern, whether the people will accept Arthur. He asks Virium who will take responsibility if something goes wrong. Virium does not hesitate twice before accepting to take the blame. Alvin and Marielle go out to receive Arthur. Alvin stands in front of Arthur, admitting that he was harsh when he arrived in the city, and that the blame is not on him, but on how humans are viewed. Arthur notices the obvious change in attitude, the same. Alvin, who hated his presence now, welcomes him warmly. Indeed, Alvin loves his family and will do anything to see them happy. He shakes Arthur's hand in welcome, but Tessia has a better idea. She challenges her father by saying that if he is really happy with Arthur's presence, then he should allow her to take him to the city to show him everything. Alvin no longer has anything to lose, as the word about this prolonged day of Arthur has already spread, so he allows it, happy. Tessia pulls Arthur by the hand and takes him to the city. She shows him the interesting people around. It is the first time Arthur sees the city of elves, and he is amazed by the appearance of this species. Tessia mentions a big store that sells snacks and fruits, and drags him there so they can beat the crowd. As they follow, a young elf purposely bumps into him. Always respectful, Arthur doesn't mind being pushed. He just apologizes and tries to move on, but the boy glares at him with disdain. He comments that Arthur has contaminated them with his human body and says it doesn't matter if Viri was Arthur in the city, as he will never be accepted for being human. Normally, Arthur wouldn't think of acting like Alicia in such a situation, but he has learned to be playful with Tessia, and this is a good opportunity to demonstrate that. The boy looks at Tessia and says that being with Arthur will only tarnish her reputation. He introduces himself as Fratravar, revealing that he is a noble and offers to accompany Tessia home. Tessia immediately reprimands him, saying that his behavior was inappropriate, but she does not know that Arthur has something better in mind. He sarcastically bows before Fratra and intentionally flubs the family name, calling it Visura instead of Sar, which sounds like an insult. Then Tessia notices the provocation and laughs, but Fratra understands the sarcasm too. Not wanting to lose his noble pose, he challenges Arthur to a duel. Challenging someone to a duel in that city is not a common occurrence. All the adults stop to watch the situation. If Arthur refuses the duel, it will mean that he lost and will dishonor both Virium and the royal family. Therefore, he accepts, even with Tessia trying to convince him that it is unnecessary. Tess asks to be the judge, and the challenge begins. Fratra arrogantly advances to face him, but Arthur knocks him down with just one blow. The proud boy falls to the ground with his eyes rolling. Tessia is not surprised. She had already warned Fratra who he was going to fight. She was not weak, and since he did not listen, now he should face the consequences. She pulls Arthur and tells him to run. He joyfully escapes with her. Over time, Arthur becomes familiar with Tessia and enjoys her company. They go out together, eat together, and even study together. Whenever an elf tries to intimidate him, Tessia immediately appears to protect him. After one of their daily walks, she leans on the railing and talks to him. His training starts the next day, and she asks how he feels about it. Arthur seems worried about something, and she insists on knowing what bothers him, and if he still wants to proceed with the training. He remembers a conversation he had with Virion earlier. In that conversation, Virion reminded Arthur that he is in a foreign land, without family or friends to support him. He has no one to trust. Still, Arthur made the decision to stay there and learn. Virion warned that the training would not be easy, but much harder than anything he had faced before. However, if he stayed and learned, despite the difficulties, his future would be guaranteed. Then Virion gave him another chance to back out, and asked if he was truly interested. Arthur confirmed that he was. Then, Virion ordered him to ignore the pain in his manicore for now. At that moment, Arthur looks at Tessia with excitement. He says he is looking forward to the training the next day, and reveals that he has already gone through many hardships and fought alongside his father. He knows that nothing he has experienced compares to what he is about to face now, but he is determined to stay strong. He believes he will become stronger. Then, Tessia extends her hand and says she will also do her best. He asks to do his best in what, and she reveals that she will always do her best so that he does not become stronger than her and so that she can compete with him. Well, we'll see, he thinks. The next day, the training begins. He positions himself in front of Virion, who introduces him to what will be the new phase of his life. As the training begins, Arthur thinks that life in the Elf Kingdom is faster than life outside it. In just a few days, he has learned a lot and is evolving. He accepted staying there because he knows it was the best decision and is taking control of his future. He tells himself that, even without knowing what he will go through in this unknown kingdom, he is sure that his future will be bright. I wish him all the best in that future. I'm eager to see what awaits him. Several days pass, and even Tessia learns to use her mana. One morning she goes to wake Arthur in bed, but he does not awaken. So, she uses her mana to wake him. He wakes up shouting at her, asking why she could not have woken him up more gently. Tessia and Arthur go outside when they notice Virion heading to a meeting. While Arthur wonders what this meeting is about, Tessia catches his attention and reveals that she prepared a hamburger for him, but before he can react, she makes it clear that he should thank her properly for her effort. Arthur, however, while devouring the hamburger, jokingly says that he is somewhat provoking Tessia on purpose and making her angry. After breakfast, they go together to the training field, where they start sparring under Virion's supervision. After a while, Virion hands out wooden swords, increasing the intensity of the training. Arthur goes back to teasing Tessia, calling her a cute little princess, and she responds that she will beat him up so he learns his lesson. As they get used to training with wooden swords, Virion decides to take the training to the next level. When they finish the fight, they gather to discuss magic. According to Virion, once a person unlocks mana in this world, they can gain affinity with one of the four elements: fire, water, wind, or earth. The element with which someone resonates partly depends on their race. For example, elves are generally attuned to wind, while other races tend to have greater control over water or earth. Dwarves, specifically, are better with earth and fire magic. Humans, for narrative reasons, have the potential to manipulate all four elements. However, this does not mean that a human can control all of them. A person can have affinity with only one element, and that affinity is entirely random. Virion also mentions extremely rare and seemingly unlikely cases in which humans manage to control multiple elements, raising the suspicion that Arthur might be one of them. This question arises because Arthur has not trained his body using magic as she has. Virion explains that Arthur is too weak for this, as his mana core contains a beast will that is disrupting the balance between his physical body and his magic, causing the pain in his chest. Arthur suspects that this beast will is related to Sylvia, but he knows it is still too early to conclude anything. Virion said that to address this problem, it is necessary to fully understand what is happening inside Arthur. Tess jokes, asking if he feels pain every time she hits him during training, and he admits that she hits hard. Arthur then explains why Tess suddenly became stronger, or at least almost as strong as him. Elves awaken their mana around the age of 10, and Tess, who is 9, has just awakened. She even destroyed her room while sleeping. This reminds Arthur of when he awakened his own mana and blew up his parents' house when he was still a baby. To further develop Tess's talent, she has started training alongside Arthur. One day during training, Virion decides it is time for Arthur to awaken his beast will. To encourage him to take this difficult step, Virion says that if the ritual is successful, Arthur will no longer feel pain and will become a true beast tamer. Intrigued, Arthur sits down for Virion to conduct the ritual. Virion explains that he first needs to ignite a flame in Arthur's mana core, ensuring that he will only feel warmth inside. Virion transfers his own mana to Arthur, but something unexpected happens. Arthur screams in pain and releases all his internal mana, throwing Virion and Tess away. At the end of the ritual, Arthur falls unconscious. As soon as he understands what happened, Virion takes Arthur back to the castle and stays by his side until he wakes up. After ensuring that Arthur is okay, Virion asks if he knows the beast will inside him. Arthur vaguely responds that it was the will of a dragon. Virion had suspected this, and since dragons are legendary creatures, he makes Arthur promise to never tell anyone about it. Malicious people might try to steal his beast will, which would lead to dangerous conflicts. Now that Arthur's beast will has been awakened, Virion says he will be able to go home after 4 months, surprising Arthur, who thought he would have to stay there. For another 2 years, Virion would explain that there would be a cultural exchange event in 4 months organized by the 3 kingdoms, and that an entry to the city of Zeos, where Arthur's parents live, would be opened. Arthur is shaken to realize that when he saw Virion leaving for a meeting, the next day he was actually going to communicate with the other kingdoms just because of him. This makes him emotional. Virion tells him to be happy because he will be reunited with his parents. Arthur then wonders how Tessia will react to this news. Virion reassures him, saying that Tessia has already been informed by her own parents. Later that night, Arthur talks to his dragon egg about the departure when the egg starts to shine. As it hatches, Arthur panics, imagining what might be inside, but when the shell breaks, a lovely little dragon, almost like a kitten, appears. Immediately, Arthur is enchanted by her cuteness. However, when she bites his arm like a puppy, he realizes that she is not so friendly after all. In fact, the bite was to place a seal on him, and now Arthur can finally hear her, although what she says is a bunch of confusing sounds. Still, he is delighted to hear her voice. He names her Sylvia in honor of his mother, Sylvia, and wonders what the meaning of the seal on his arm is. In any case, he can hardly believe that he has become a father at just 8 years old. The arrival of the new pet is surprising, and the expectation of how the rest of the community will react to this novelty, especially Tess because of her cheerful personality. The next day, Tessia arrives as usual to wake Arthur. Since he is sleeping deeply, her light touch has no effect. She then removes the blanket and sees the strange creature. Her scream is so loud that it wakes Arthur, but contrary to what one would expect, it is not a scream of fear. There, Tessia is excited about the new creature. She picks her up and cuddles her like a baby. Together, they go to the training field to find Virium. On the way, Tess pays attention to everything to see if Virium likes her and goes to her, but Sylvia, or better, the beast, only prefers her master. When they arrive at the training field, Virium is not surprised. He asks if that creature is the result of the beast's will association, and Arthur confirms, looking at Sylvia. Arthur thinks about how much she might feel rejected by society, but even without him saying anything, Virium senses his concern and reassures him, saying that there will be no problem. No one would believe that it is a real dragon, so they can just say it is a special magical beast. The training for that day officially begins, and Virium explains that now that Arthur has awakened his bestial mana, he must train it too. And what better way to train than in a physical duel? Virium transforms into his spiritual beast. The creature is terrifying. The sound, the energy, and even the dark light that is her mana intimidate the children. To make matters worse, Virium commands Arthur to face him. Arthur can barely see him and quickly gives up, admitting defeat. Virium returns to his elf form and explains that the creature is called Shadow Panther, a beast that uses sound and light so stealthily that it becomes practically invisible. Despite being powerful, it consumes a lot of energy. Since he has already finished fighting Arthur, Virium grabs a stick to train like normal people. Days go by, then weeks, maybe even months. Arthur trains, his bestial will and his mana. He strengthens himself and is finally able to face the Dark Panther. With the opening of the gate approaching, Tessia begins to feel the weight of Arthur's imminent absence. The city celebrates a festival before the exchange. Tessia cannot enjoy it, as her friend will be leaving. Arthur tries to convince her to at least smile on another day. While walking through the city, a boy bumps into him and stares at him oddly for being human. The boy is Fit, remember him, the same elf who had challenged Arthur to a duel and lost with a single blow. He approaches again and asks if Arthur remembers him. Arthur sincerely says no. Who would blame him? Fit seems insignificant, trying to explain himself. The boy insists he is ready for a rematch, as he now knows he can defeat him. The outcome does not change. Arthur hits him and he falls to the ground. He tells Arthur who the boy is, and Arthur extends his hand in greeting. Surprisingly, Fit accepts the handshake, revealing that all he wanted was to be friends with Arthur and that he was sad when Arthur did not extend his hand the first time. They talk, and Arthur discovers that Fit will also participate in the exchange program. Fit reveals that all the noble's children are going, but he does not know this since Tessia did not say she was going too. He looks at her to ask if she is going, but Tessia replies that she will not go because they do not want their fragile princess to get lost again. Fragile is not a word that should be used. For Tessia, considering how strong she is and how he thinks she is fragile, she needs to show how strong she is. She hits him and he flies through the air, falling like a ball in an inflatable castle. He immediately faints. He has never seen a princess hit her subordinate before. I think that was the first time. Seeing how the situation is unfolding, Arthur quickly drags her away. As they move away, he warns that a princess should preserve herself and should not hit her subordinates. But she does not care about that. She has so much on her mind, especially the fact that he is leaving, and Tessia just fell into a trap. She complains that Arthur is leaving and is still acting like her father by scolding her. She calls him old and runs away. She goes to her room to cry, and Arthur, realizing that she is downcast, goes to her through the window holding bluebell flowers. She notices him through the window and goes to him. He puts the flower in her ear and invites her to go out with him. They walk through the forest, despite the warnings they received about not going there. Then he lights a fire so they can camp, and they sit down to talk. She begins to get sleepy, and he is encouraged to sleep, but she wants to stay with him. They start talking about the human world, but she eventually falls asleep. The next day, Arthur prepares to leave. They will come to give him a compass so he does not get lost, and also says that the compass has the symbol of aerolite, so if he wants to, return, he will know the way. They will also reveal in a disguised manner that they knew about their escapade the night before. Before leaving, Arthur asks about Tessia, but assumes she is too downcast to say goodbye. When he is in front of the portal with the other children, Tessia calls his name and runs to him. She even trips on the way. She holds him, remembering not to skip meals. When he returns home, he hugs her, saying he will miss her. In tears, she replies that she will miss him too, and the portal opens. Indeed, it is an emotional farewell. After a long journey, Arthur returns to the human realm. Upon landing in the realm of Zias, he is happy to see his parents again. He walks to his house, prepares himself, and knocks on the door. A little girl runs to the door to open it. He looks at the sweet girl before him, knowing that she is his sister. His parents rush to the door, calling the girl Eleanor. When they reach the door, they are so shocked that they can't even react. He smiles at them, saying he has returned. Alice and Reynold can't believe their eyes upon seeing Arthur before them and hug him tightly to welcome him back. Their daughter tells Alice that she shouldn't cry, and Arthur turns to the girl, realizing that she is his sister, for whom he would be willing to sacrifice his own life. He kneels before his sister Helena and introduces himself, leaving her quite surprised to finally see her brother. Then, Arthur enters the house, where Alice begins to ask him questions about the time he spent away. He assures her that he is fine, and even the realm requests that she stop smothering the boy with questions. Meanwhile, she feels jealous of all the attention Arthur is receiving from their parents, but Alice tells her to befriend him because he is the brother they talked about in stories. Arthur responds that he wanted very much to meet her. And then the baby dragon Sylvia jumps into the girl's arms. When everyone calms down, Arthur recounts in detail what happened after separating from the family. However, he omits the existence of Sylvia because he doesn't know how his parents would react. He says he survived, even thanking a stroke of luck. He narrates how he rescued the Tees and stayed in the Ephig realm during the following years, training and treating his illness. He hides everything about Sylvia and the beast core he possesses, only explaining that she is a mana beast he adopted after finding her mother too weakened to survive. His parents believe him and are just relieved that he is alive. Suddenly, Reynold asks what stage Arthur's youngest is at, and Alice rebukes him for bringing up this topic right after their son's return. Arthur, for his part, asks about his father's current job, and Reynold boasts about being a security instructor at a famous auction house. Reynold declares that his youngest reached dark orange 2 years ago, an intermediate stage on the power scale. Arthur is impressed, acknowledging his father's effort to get there, but reveals that he himself is at light red, 1 level below. Reynold is flustered at being about to be surpassed by his son and challenges him to a friendly duel, wanting to see how much he has evolved. Despite Alice's protests, some people invade the house. A man named Vincent asks if it is true that Reynold's son is alive, and Arthur wonders who that guy is. Reynold explains that Vincent is the owner of the auction house where he works. In fact, that house also belongs to him. Arthur greets Vincent and his wife and soon becomes friends with their daughter, Lelia, thanks to Sylvia's cuteness. Reynold then invites Vincent to watch the duel between him and Arthur in the garden, and everyone heads there. Vincent is surprised to learn that Arthur's youngest is at light red stage. Alice explains that her son learns quickly and would have no reason to lie. Still, Vincent finds it hard to believe, as even the best students from the most renowned academies reach this level only at 13, while Arthur is just 8. Meanwhile, Arthur and Reynold finish warming up and face off against each other. Arthur blocks his father's attacks and counters, but Reynold easily stops him, saying he still needs to improve. Nevertheless, Arthur surprises everyone by using techniques learned from Vian, managing to push Reynold back. Reynold admits to being impressed but warns that he will not give another chance. Now he will fight seriously. He concentrates mana in his fist, transforming it into fire, which surprises Arthur. In this world, every mana user is born with a specific element. For casters, identifying and using that element is easy, but for enhancers like Reynold, a lot of practice and perception is necessary to reach that level. Suddenly, Reynold covers his entire body with his blazing mana and charges at Arthur, who can only defend himself, being pushed back. Arthur thinks about how in his past life he used a power called Kai, which worked basically like mana, but allowed the user to choose the desired element. He believes that since he was born without a specific element in this life, he can use all of them, thanks to the training accumulated in his 2 existences. With this, he believes he has what it takes to defeat Reynold. He gathers mana in his fists, which begin to emit a golden glow, surprising everyone. Arthur runs at his father and blocks his flaming fists with the golden aura emanating from his hands. The shock of the collision between the two generates a shockwave that pushes them apart. Reynold then attacks more aggressively and lands a solid blow. Arthur runs again at his father, recalling how he used his mastery of Kai during training with Vian, which greatly improved his results. He quickly mastered the fire element, and, because of that, the old elf decided to take him a step further. Now recalling the training, Arthur releases the golden aura again and transforms it into electricity. The lightning released from Arthur's body ignites the grass, and Reynold can only stare at him in disbelief upon realizing that Arthur had mastered the superior form of fire magic. Arthur then tells him that it is too early to be surprised, as he still has more tricks. Suddenly, he uses water magic by manipulating the water from the fountain to attack Reynold. Everyone is shocked to see him use 2 types of magic simultaneously, and Reynold can barely dodge the attack from behind. Then, Arthur cancels his spells, and Reynold immediately embraces him. He says he is proud and asks when he learned that. Arthur replies that he had learned recently, but still did not master water well. While Alice and Helena take it as something normal, Vincent and his wife are left speechless, convinced that Arthur is a genius. Shortly after, everyone returns inside the house and sits at the table, where Vincent comments that Arthur's future is bright. Reynold agrees, saying he has known this since Arthur awakened his mana at 3 years old and destroyed the house in the process. Vincent is surprised to hear this, while Reynold, laughing proudly, fell along with his chair. Vincent stands up and suggests sending Arthur to the Zeros Academy. Reynold was surprised and asked if he was sure, as the Zeros Academy was the best school for wizards on the continent. Vincent's wife completely agreed, saying that Arthur's parents wouldn't need to worry about expenses, as they wanted to sponsor his education, hoping to benefit from it in the future. Alice became nervous upon hearing the proposal, and commented that they didn't even know if the academy would accept their son. But Vincent confidently replied that he knew the academy's director and could arrange it. Suddenly, Arthur spoke up, saying that since the matter directly concerned him, he should have a say in the decision. Lily mentioned that she had just gathered with her family and did not want to part ways so soon. Vincent understood her reasons. Then, Arthur said goodbye, stating that he was tired after the combat. He entered the house, but Lily followed him, enchanted since she first saw his power. She warned him that he was going the wrong way and asked him to follow her, as she would take him to a better place. She led Arthur to the kitchen in the basement, where she started cheerfully chatting with the servants, asking for delicious meat dishes. The old maid commented that Lily should watch her diet, as she had gained weight, and Lily shot back, telling her not to comment on that. Arthur was surprised to see this side of Lily, as she had barely spoken up to that point. One of the maids mentioned that she always came there to eat when she was stressed. Arthur asked why, and the maid explained that Lily and her parents hoped she would awaken as a mage, which put enormous pressure on her. That evening, Alice and Reynold went to Arthur's room to talk more. They said they were very happy with his return, and that they were also very proud, claiming that he would become a great wizard. Arthur wanted to share something, but they interrupted him, saying they could talk about it the next day. Then, they wished him good night and let him sleep. The next morning, Arthur rushed to the hall as soon as he woke up, as some old friends were there to see him. They were the members of his parents' group, who were very happy to see him back. Mama Angelo hugged him so tightly that he could barely breathe. Then he exchanged a fist bump with Adam the Tank, and they started arguing as usual while welcoming Arthur. Suddenly, Jasmine began to pat him down for no apparent reason, just because she wanted to touch him. Afterwards, she hugged him, asking for forgiveness and saying it was all her fault. After this emotional reunion, the group began to tell Arthur about their recent adventures in distant places, and as usual, they continued to argue over trivial matters. As he listened to them, Arthur realized that there was much about this world he still didn't know, and that becoming an adventurer could be a good way to learn. However, looking at his family, he felt that he wasn't ready to leave them again. When Arthur began to meditate, time simply stopped. It might be some new superpower technique he was trying, but it comes at a cost. He can only maintain it for a few seconds before becoming completely exhausted. Silvio appeared, and her cuteness was enough to motivate Arthur. He hugged her, grateful to have her by his side, but she let out one of the most stinky farts in history, making Arthur faint just from the smell. To clean her up, he takes her for a bath and forces her to soak in the tub. Even against his will, seeing his resistance, Arthur tries to explain that they cannot afford to appear dirty in that house since the mansion belongs to the wealthy Halia family. Speaking of them, Arthur remembers hearing one of the maids mention that Vincent and Tabita Halia are worried about their daughter, Lily, who has not yet awakened her mana. They want Lily to become a maid, but she doesn't care much about it. It's starting to become an annoyance. Meanwhile, Silvio begins to sneeze from being wet for too long, so Arthur dries him off and finishes taking care of him. Suddenly, Alice appears with everyone and declares that now it is Arthur's turn to get ready. She takes him to the most extravagant barber in town, who calls him a hidden diamond in the trash, but assures that he will polish this diamond and reveal its hidden shine. After God knows what, Arthur comes out looking like a true gallant, impressing all the women. Habita praises him, saying that he is finally presentable enough to enter their auction house. Alice explains that the auction house is often visited by royalty, so they needed to give Arthur a makeover before taking him there. Instead of boosting his confidence, all of this makes Arthur feel worse, as if he looked terrible before. Moving on, Tabita decides to show Arthur the city of Ziru. Her little sister Eleanor asks him to be her escort, which makes Lily jealous. She comments that he used to love walking with her before Arthur appeared and compliments his new look, letting slip that it was she who chose the outfit. Arthur goes out with everyone to the market, where Alice buys several new clothes for him. After shopping, the group plays in the central square near the statue of the king, when a group of students from the Shiru Academy of Magic throws something at Arthur, acting like true bullies. Arthur ignores them to avoid trouble, and they eventually leave. Lily then explains that the students are treated like royalty because of their status as wizards, but Arthur really doesn't care about that. As he continues walking with the group, he feels a mysterious aura coming from a shop. Inside, there are several beast cores. According to Tabita, a beast core is a magical core taken from a magical beast and serves to considerably increase a person's strength. Arthur was already familiar with this concept since Silvio technically came from such a core, but he didn't know that people traded this kind of thing, as it is not common in the Effico kingdom. Tabita continues her explanation, saying that there are very rare cases where a beast core contains a beast's will, which increases its value so much that even the cheapest ones, costing from 100 gold coins, could support Arthur's family for hundreds of years. She reveals that she and her husband plan to put some of these cores in the next auction. Seeing Arthur's interest, she promises to let him touch one of them, which seems to be a great honor. Arthur pretends to be excited, but deep down he is satisfied with the beast's will he already possesses. Suddenly, Lily becomes sad, and her mother realizes the reason. Lily wants a beast core for herself, which is understandable since her family works with this, and she hopes it will help awaken her mana. However, Tabita says that this is not how it works, and, besides, they cannot spend that much money on a useless child like her. Lily insists, saying that they can look for cheaper cores. Elsewhere, Tabita has already decided to end the conversation. Later, the group goes to a restaurant for lunch, but Arthur cannot enjoy the meal as he notices how sad Lily is. He observes and understands the situation she is in. Her father, Vincent, has high expectations for her, and because of this, she is trying to force the awakening of her mana. Arthur wants to help her, as his family has helped his. But when he turns to talk to her, he realizes that Lily has disappeared. He goes to look for her and finds her in a weapon shop, where she has gone alone to try to buy a cheap crossbow core using her savings. Arthur stops her, explaining that even if she gets the core, her mana will not awaken, as the world does not work like a system. She insists and vents to Arthur, saying how unfair it is to be a talentless child, unlike him, who is super special. As the verbal argument between them escalates, Lily accidentally bumps into a student from the Shiru Academy. She immediately apologizes, as it was unintentional, but the student, along with two friends, is not willing to forgive her easily. The three spoiled teenagers want to punish Lily for her insolence, and even the store owner does not have the courage to intervene. Then, Arthur springs into action, activating his magic. But at that exact moment, Tabita appears, ending the commotion and revealing that she is the head of the Helia family. Upon learning of her position, the students decide not to pursue the incident, as the Helia family makes large donations to the academy and has significant influence. However, they provoke Lily one last time before leaving. The women return home with Arthur and inform Vincent about what happened. He feels relieved that the fight ended before Arthur could destroy the bullies. In any case, Vincent asks both Lily and Arthur to be more careful with their actions, especially Arthur, who will soon join the Shiru Academy. This is the first time Lily hears that Vincent is sponsoring Arthur's entry into the academy. She assumes that Vincent is giving the spot to him instead of her, as he does not see her as a good investment. Very emotional, Lily runs over and tells Vincent and Arthur that she hates them. After this embarrassing situation, Arthur tries not to be shaken. He knows that the girl did not really mean all that. Later, he goes to her room to call her for dinner. He knocks on the door several times, but receives no response. Silvio draws his attention to an employee behind him, who informs him that Lily is not in her room and leads him to where she is. Meanwhile, Lily is lost in thought. She reflects on everything that has happened over the years and how her parents must be disappointed in her. She remembers when she was a child and how her father expressed the wish for her to become a mage. Since she was little, all she wanted was to make her parents proud. However, life and fate did not go as she imagined. She wonders when she will finally awaken her magic. She recalls how her mother said not to rush the process, and how her father, even with her slow progress, never lost hope and said he had made several donations to the academy, ensuring that no matter when she awakened, she would be accepted. Hearing her father say the same words to a boy who arrived days ago breaks her heart. She feels like a failure. To make matters worse, the students at the academy said that she would only be able to get a manicure with money, which only reinforces her feeling of being a child with all the resources, but not knowing how to use them. Then, Arthur shows up and tries to pull her out of those thoughts. He says that her parents are worried about her. He feels guilty, thinking that he is part of the reason for her sadness, considers apologizing but holds back. Even if it were sincere, it would seem false, especially since he knows he hasn't done anything wrong. Fortunately, Lily recognizes her mistake, and it's she who apologizes. She says she didn't want to hurt him, that she always felt bad for not being able to awaken her magic, and when he arrived with such extraordinary abilities, she felt even more left behind. To make matters worse, it seems that all of her father's attention has been on Arthur since his arrival. Arthur denies it, and as he touches her face, she lights up. He understands what she feels, the feeling of being left behind. He talks about where he learned magic, from a girl he met and how she treated him. He shows the bellflower she wove for him, and Lily thinks it's beautiful too. He explains that Vincent is just excited, and that's why he trusts her so much. Arthur knows that motivational words are not enough. If he wants to help her, he needs to do something real. He asks if she wants to learn magic, and she says yes. He realizes that, regardless of what Vincent feels, she will always think her father only wants her to become a maid. Later, Lily's parents find out that she left home and are worried about the reason. Lily confronts Arthur and reveals that he sent her to the place where he learned magic. Vincent gets furious. Even if Arthur had good intentions, he should have asked for consent before making such a decision. Arthur explains that it was Lily's desire. If the parents had gotten involved, she might have given up. Now he hands over the letter she left. Lily apologizes for feeling useless, says she knows she is good for nothing at the moment, so she will learn to become a mage, and no matter how long it takes, she will awaken her magic. Before leaving, Vincent falls to his knees, realizing his mistake. He has passed on to his daughter the idea that only by becoming a mage could she make the family proud, and now she feels that she is useless without it. He cries, saying that even if she doesn't awaken her magical power, she is still his precious daughter and will always be useful to them. Upon hearing this, Arthur calls out Lily's name and asks if she can hear. Vincent leaves and reveals that it was all a joke. She didn't go anywhere. Arthur had done this just so she could understand how much she is worth to her parents. She apologizes for playing such an expensive joke, but Arthur takes the blame since he was the one who started it all. He said he knows how sad it is for a parent to lose a child. He remembers how his parents felt when he disappeared and promises not to play with that anymore. He just wanted to prove his point. Vincent realizes he was too excited about the idea of his daughter being a mage and wonders why he thinks it is so easy. If it were that easy, why isn't he a mage too? He apologizes to Arthur for trying to send the girl to the academy, even after just reuniting with her parents. He goes to his daughter, hugs her together with Tabita, and tells her that no matter what happens, she is his daughter and he doesn't need her to go to the academy anymore. She smiles and says that she still wishes to be a mage, and studying there doesn't matter how long it takes. Since the mindset issue has already been resolved, Arthur prepares to help her awaken her magical power. He asks her and her sister to sit down, asking them to take deep breaths, knowing that breathing is one of the fastest ways to connect to magic. He requests them to close their eyes and continue breathing, saying they will soon see shining stars. Just as he predicted, Eleanor reveals that she saw some stars, but they vanished. He understands that this happened because she stopped breathing and asks her to continue. This makes Lily wonder why she isn't seeing anything. He approaches them and gives gentle pats on their backs, trying to connect his mana to theirs. Soon, Lily sees her stars. She says they look like the dome he showed her once. Their parents are very happy and quickly arrange a party to celebrate this moment. During the party, Arthur tells Lily that she will need to practice for about 2 years to get the hang of it, but if she keeps breathing deeply, she will be fine. She is so excited that she asks which element she will be able to use. Our little girl is getting ahead of herself. The two of them laugh enthusiastically. A man enters the town with several attendants. It is believed to be the king. He heard about the auction house, and his only purpose upon hearing is to see what this place is. What does this mean for our Arthur? Arthur finally meets the Helia family auction house. His little sister comments that it looks like a castle, and his mother worries if they will be able to adhere to the nobility's etiquette. Inside the auction, Arthur sees various aristocrats and important adventurers waiting to buy the auction items. Lily and her sister are fascinated by seeing beast cores, while Arthur is interested in a statue. Meanwhile, his father gives instructions to his subordinates to ensure that nothing goes wrong on such an important day. Arthur is shocked by his father's maturity. Vincent then announces that the auction will begin and introduces King Blind Glider and his family. Everyone present at the auction applauds the royal family, which makes Arthur think they are quite popular. The auction starts, and Arthur's father and his adventurer friends are on guard to ensure nothing goes wrong. The first auction item is a sword forged by a renowned craftsman that, when imbued with mana, starts emitting paralysis-inducing lightning. The starting bid is 50 gold coins, and Arthur is impressed to discover that weapons can receive elemental enchantments, deciding to try to do something similar later. The next item catches Arthur's attention, some cement masks. His mother asks if he is interested, but Arthur remembers that they are poor and couldn't buy it anyway, and his mother agrees. Shortly after, Arthur realizes that Silvio is not with him. His mother comments that she was with his sister, so Arthur goes out to look for her. We see Silvio walking along the auction's red carpet when suddenly a mysterious man knocks a staff in front of him. Back at the auction, Vincent presents a lion from the world as the next item, stating that when they grow, they become powerful mana beasts, possibly reaching the ranking. At this moment, the king's son declares that he wants that beast, and the king simply agrees. Vincent announces that the minimum bid for the beast is 100 gold coins, and the audience begins to make its offers rapidly, reaching 500 coins. At that moment, the king offers 1,000 gold coins, and everyone is impressed. Vincent congratulates the king on the purchase and says it is natural that no one can outbid him. He asks if the king will tame the lion to be his mana beast, but the king says that it will be a task for his son, and that whether he will manage to tame the lion or not will depend on his efforts. At that moment, the boy says he will do his best. On the other side of the auction, we see Arthur looking for Sylvie, and when he finds her, he sees a man in a mysterious hood trying to grab her. He interrupts the action and realizes that the man is a conjurer in the service of the king, and that it would be wise not to cause trouble. He apologizes to the conjurer and says that Sylvie is his mana beast. The conjurer asks if she is not an auction item due to being a rare mana beast. Sylvie runs to Arthur, and the conjurer becomes angry. At that moment, Arthur realizes that he will not be able to leave without getting into trouble. The conjurer demands that he let him hear and leaves. Arthur refuses, and the man strikes his staff once more, saying that he has been searching for a mana beast worthy of him for a long time, asserting that a weakling like Arthur cannot exploit the full potential of the beast. He suddenly attacks Arthur, trying to intimidate him, tells Sylvie to make a pact with him and thank him for his kindness. Arthur refuses, and he attacks him again. Arthur turns his back to leave, and the wizard threatens to harm his family for not following the royal family's orders. When Arthur hears this, he loses control and lets his bloodlust slip out. The king senses the threat, and all the windows of the auction begin to shatter with the intensity of Arthur's aura. Vincent falls to his knees, unable to withstand the pressure, and even the king starts to sweat cold in front of that overwhelming bloodlust. Guards arrive to protect the king, who says he is fine and orders them to protect the others. The royal wizard falls to the ground, and Arthur approaches him. At that moment, Arthur realizes he has lost control and calms down. Everyone at the auction is terrified, and Arthur apologizes to Sylvie. At that moment, the king arrives and calls Reynolds, as he is responsible for the security of the place, saying that he failed to capture the intruder. Reynolds apologizes, but the king says that this requires disciplinary action. At that moment, the wizard arrives and says that there wasn't much damage, so they don't need to punish him, but comments that Arthur has a very interesting beast. Arthur realizes that he has fallen into his trap. The king then says that the wizard's name is Sebastian, and that he has been looking for a way to reward him for his services to the royal family for a long time. He asks for Arthur's beast, saying that this would avoid a punishment, but Arthur's father says that he did not participate in any way in the adoption of Sylvie, so he cannot make that decision. It is solely up to his son. The king turns to Arthur and asks what he thinks of his suggestion. Sylvie climbs down from Arthur's shoulder, ready to fight, but Arthur tells her to stay calm because he is the king of that place. He thanks the king for the kind offer, but says that he cannot agree to give Sylvie away, as she is very important to him. However, the king continues to insist, wanting to trade the lion he bought for his son for Sylvie. Arthur denies once again, saying that he has no intention of giving, selling, or trading Sylvie. The king begins to become nervous at having his request refused twice, and in a more threatening tone, says he will ask one last time if he will give up his mana beast. At that moment, Arthur stands up and asks the king how much he will offer. "Would you sell your children?" The king is startled, and Arthur says he asked 3 times, and each time Arthur refused, and that either he was foolish or his pride prevented him from accepting no as an answer. The wizard finds him insolent and tells the guards to attack. The guards move toward Arthur, but he massacres them with just one blow. The wizard is in shock, but says that his beast is worth it and begins to conjure a spell. He unleashes fire against Arthur, but at that moment time stops. Everyone is frozen, as if they were stone. The only 2 who can move are the wizard and Arthur himself, who awakens his beast mana, leaving the wizard terrified. Arthur tells him to shut up and breaks his leg. He starts screaming and asks why everyone is standing still while he screams in pain. At that moment, Arthur approaches him and says that no one can hear him with enough attention while he is still conscious. The wizard then says that he is not going to get away with hurting someone from the royal family, and, at that moment, Arthur loses his patience and displays his dragon aura to the wizard, who pleads for mercy. Soon after, everyone can move again. Arthur faints from expending too much mana. When Arthur wakes up, he realizes he overdid it using Silvio's mana and sits on the bed, commenting that he needs to train more. At that moment, his mother arrives with Silvio and is happy that he woke up. He then asks her what happened after he fainted, and his mother tells him that everyone was in a panic. She tried to use healing magic, but he wouldn't wake up. They took him to the doctor, and the doctor said that, with rest, he would soon wake up. Later, they went to the market to clear their minds, and Arthur saw a hair clip and said he would love it. His mother then bought it for him to give to her, and asked if he wanted to buy something for himself. He was shocked because he thought they wouldn't have money, especially now that his father had probably been fired. But his mother said she has her own job. Apparently, she makes popular creations, even among the nobles, which are sold in all markets. Sabita introduced her to several connections from the auction house. Arthur helps his mother with the shopping, and they return home. At home, a strange man is trying to convince Reynaldo to accept the money, and he says it's not a matter of money, as his son was almost killed. At that moment, Arthur and his mother enter the house and see the adventurers listening behind the door. They ask what happened, and the adventurers tell them not to make a noise. When Arthur enters the room, his father asks how he feels, and he says he is very well. The strange man talks to him, saying that, on behalf of the king, he came to offer apologies in good faith for the little incident that occurred. Arthur imagines it was because of the attack from the guards and the wizard's magic, then realizes they don't want the matter to be publicized. Arthur understands and accepts gratefully. The young man says he is very polite and that the 2 guards who attacked him were fired. Reynolds, still outraged over the attempt to kill a child, complains, but the other young man says this occurred because of Arthur's behavior and his failure in security. Then he falls silent. Arthur says it's all right, as he went too far, and the most important thing is that he is not hurt. He asks about the wizard who had his leg broken, and the man replies that he was dismissed from his position and sent for treatment. As soon as he woke up, he said that Arthur broke his leg, and the king thought he was crazy. He determined that the mana of the 2 soldiers who attacked Arthur was reflected and broke his leg. The king lamented the incident, and, for that reason, offered this demonstration of goodwill. He said that Arthur is incredibly talented, but that Reynolds must teach him good manners, as not everyone is as patient as the king. With that, he hands Arthur the bag of money, and Arthur is confused, but his father says that it was he who almost died, and for that reason, should keep the money and use it as he sees fit. Praising the attack he made on the guards, when he is alone in the room, he remembers that he is still just a child and has no power to challenge a nation. The next day, he goes to what appears to be a school, and several students are carrying their mana crossbows on their shoulders. He is with Sylvie. At that moment, an owl stops in front of him and then flies away. Arthur runs after it, but bumps into an old woman with white hair who says she has been waiting for him. Arthur goes to the Magic Academy, but not to enroll. Instead, he runs into the forest around the campus, where the headmistress is waiting for him after Vincent arranged a meeting between them. Arthur really wants to take advantage of this chance, since the headmistress has total control over the academy, and her influence in the politics of the country rivals that of the royal family itself. The headmistress is also pleased to see Arthur, as she has heard many good things about him from Vincent and wants to verify personally if he is really as strong as they say. Arthur declares that he is ready, and the lady uses her magic to create a barrier that prevents them from being detected. She is already impressed when Arthur remains unshaken, even with the absurd amount of mana used. But in fact, Arthur is just hiding his surprise. He decides to show only a small fraction of his power, enough to grab her attention. First, he uses wind magic to lift some stones from the ground and throw them at the headmistress. However, she simply stops them with earth magic and shatters them easily. Arthur is shocked, but decides to try with other elements since his wind magic is the weakest at the moment. He attacks with earth magic from all sides at once, but the lady dodges everything using wind magic. Then, Arthur decides to show his hand-to-hand combat skills and rushes at her after, strengthening his body with magic. However, the old woman easily pushes him away with a gust of wind. When Arthur falls to the ground, he realizes he has been defeated, but fortunately, that was enough to impress the headmistress. She says that Arthur seems to overestimate his abilities, but acknowledges that he is strong and skillful. She proposes a final test before accepting him as a student. Arthur needs to remain conscious after her next attack. Headmistress Minto casts a powerful spell that makes Arthur feel like his head is being split in half. Even so, he manages to hold on until the end of the magic, and the headmistress declares that he passed the test. She says she would like to accept him as her personal student to teach him everything she knows. However, as Arthur continues to stare at her in silence, she asks what he really wants to say, since he wouldn't have needed to go there and displayed his abilities for nothing. Arthur replies that she has the authority and power he needs to protect his family. If she can guarantee this for him, then he is willing to join the academy and accept her as a mentor. The director is surprised by his statement and comments that not even the king would make such a one-sided proposal. Arthur says he trusts he is worthy of this agreement and that she is thinking the same. The director, instead of being offended, is pleased with his attitude. Then, Arthur declares that he will only join the academy when he reaches the appropriate age. The lady explains that he will attain the required age in 3 years, and that if he joined now, he could become much stronger. Arthur insists that he wants to live his life and experience the world, since he still has time. Therefore, he intends to spend the next 3 years as an adventurer. The director considers this idea valid, but asks if he has told his parents about it. Arthur replies that he will still talk to them, and she states that if he can convince them, she will accept the agreement. However, things at home turn out to be more complicated than Arthur imagined. His parents learn of his plans to become an adventurer through Vincent, even before he could tell them personally. Alice becomes furious, as she does not want to let her son go after he just returned home. However, Reynaldo understands that every man needs to have an adventure in his life. He says that maybe if Arthur has a guardian by his side all the time, he can leave as an adventurer. But Alice refuses to listen. Arthur ends up convincing her by promising that he will return home every few months, and that if she wants, he can come back more often. Lenore also feels sad about his departure, but Arthur assures her that he will still stay home for some time. Alice wonders why he wants so much to leave for an adventure. Arthur gives diplomatic answers, stating that he wishes to feel the same excitement that his parents felt in their youth. In reality, he just wants to test his powers in combat. Alice accepts the answer, but Reynaldo insists that Arthur needs a guardian to ensure his safety. He then invites all the former members of his group for lunch and asks who would be willing to take care of Arthur. Adam immediately declines, saying that he does not like children and fears that Arthur might kill him in his sleep. Everyone agrees, but thinks that if that happens, it will be Adam's fault. Reynaldo says he cannot pay much for the job at the moment, but his friends reassure him, stating that they want to see Arthur grow. Suddenly, Jasmine, the trainer, volunteers for the task, which shocks Alice, as Jasmine hates being a bodyguard more than anyone. However, she states she will do it for Arthur, and everyone agrees that she will be an excellent choice, as she is an Algin and also knows how to use wind magic. Adam gives his approval as the leader of the group, and everything is resolved. Later that same day, Arthur and his family find Lily meditating alone in the living room, which makes Lenore irritated that she started training without her company. Arthur was satisfied with the results of the training. He just hoped Lenore would not awaken her magic too soon, as that would attract unwanted attention. After that, he went to the auction house to choose a weapon he would use for the test, to join the Adventurer Guild. Vincent told him to browse freely, and Arthur headed to the armory, marveling at the number of weapons available. However, this soon became a problem, as he could not choose any. Most of the swords were two-handed. Even the ones that were one-handed were still too big for him. However, Silvio soon found something special. At first, Arthur thought it was a bar of iron stuck under a table, but when he pulled it, he realized it was too heavy to be just iron. He soon understood it was a sword, but he couldn't draw it normally, so he decided to use his physical enhancement skills to succeed. When he channeled his magic through the weapon, strange words appeared before his eyes, and finally, he managed to pull out the magnificent sword made of translucent crystal. Arthur found the sword a little too heavy to control well, but it was so sharp that he managed to cut through a barrel with a single blow. He noticed something engraved on the blade, but he couldn't understand what it was. Suddenly, the sword emitted a shock that made him drop it. When he picked it up again, it was much lighter. He realized that even the length of the blade had changed to fit his small body. Now he could wield it with ease. Arthur was surprised, as he had never heard of a weapon adjusting to its user. At that moment, Rinaldo and Vincent came looking for him, as he had been in the armory for too long. Arthur panicked and asked for a minute, quickly grabbing any common sword, and told his father and Vincent that he wanted that sword. Rinaldo did some tests before approving it. Vincent also saw no problem, but noticed the second sword at Arthur's waist. The boy panicked, but quickly composed himself and said he had found a heavy and sturdy bar, perfect for training. Vincent didn't remember having anything like that in the warehouse, but his assistant commented on a crazy old man who had thrown that iron bar at him, saying that there was no one suitable to use it. They said they tried to take it for evaluation, but no one could figure anything out and asked if they should look for a better evaluator. Arthur did not want to part with the sword at all, so he immediately put his childhood charm into practice to convince Vincent to let him take the stick. Vincent completely fell for it, saying that Arthur could keep it since they weren't even planning to sell it. Arthur was thrilled, but Rinaldo began to suspect that Vincent might be getting tricked. After that, Arthur returned to live a normal routine with his family, completing his chore list while training to become an adventurer. Soon he turned 9 years old, and a small birthday party was organized. Everyone brought special gifts to help him on his journey as an adventurer. Rinaldo and Alice gave him a glove with magical stones containing healing spells that Alice herself had sealed so he could heal himself in case of injuries. Vincent gave him a ring that worked as a sensor. If Arthur was in danger, it would trigger an alarm and alert Alice. Ada and the members of his old team gifted Arthur a sound scroll that would allow him to send messages home and receive replies. Arthur thanked everyone for the gifts and promised that he would become the best adventurer they had ever seen. Alice hugged him, saying that he didn't need to be rich or successful, he just needed to come back safely. Later that night, Arthur packed his backpack to begin his journey, reflecting on how he needed to be stronger than he was in his past life to protect his family and friends. Then he went down the stairs and found his whole family. Waiting for him, they said their emotional goodbyes, wishing good luck. With that, Arthur set off on his journey alongside Jasmine. First, Arthur and Jasmine go to the Adventurers Guild to register Arthur as a new adventurer. Jasmine, being a veteran adventurer, personally assures the guild receptionist of Arthur's abilities and demands that he be allowed to take the ranking evaluation test. Naturally, she does not mention Arthur's true name, as he is wearing a mask, probably to hide his true identity from the world. Arthur fills out the application form, and then the two of them, along with the receptionist, head to the next room for the next step in the process. While walking, Arthur keeps his hand over the mask to ensure that no one sees his face, and explains to us that he is doing this because he does not want the royal family to discover his powers. The receptionist takes them to the guildmaster's office, Caspian, who expresses concern about conducting the test. Caspian explains that all aspiring adventurers must first take a written test and have their mana core assessed before they can participate in the ranking evaluation. However, since Jasmine, a rank A adventurer from the guild, is making the request, Caspian agrees to make an exception, but whispers something in her ear about Jasmine's father, insinuating that he hopes she will return the favor later. Jasmine does not respond, so Caspian continues with the process and asks Arthur what name he wants to use, since he did not fill in that field on the form. Arthur thinks for a moment and decides he wants to be called Note. Seriously, perhaps inspired by Tent Note. Caspian then shakes Arthur's hand and, at that moment, sends a wave of mana through his arm to assess him, confirming that Arthur is indeed strong. Realizing that Jasmine has her reasons for keeping Arthur's identity a secret, Caspian allows them to proceed to the arena. Along the way, Arthur asks Jasmine if she is friends with the Guildmaster, but she responds negatively, saying they are just just acquaintances because her father has strong connections with the guild. Then, Silvio, Arthur's companion, pops out of his backpack, wanting to get some air. Jasmine is surprised to see her, as Silvio no longer looks like just a little kitten. Arthur explains that Silvio has the ability to shapeshift and has now chosen a new form that she likes better, putting aside Silvio's cuteness. They enter the arena, where several newcomers are lining up to take the ranking evaluation test against an instructor. A young conjurer named Diane fights against the evaluator. Although her attack is strong, she has weak defense and ends up receiving rank C, which, according to Jasmine, is already a great result under normal circumstances. Soon after, it's Elijah's turn, but before he can fight, the announcer argues with the evaluators and immediately grants him rank B. The audience is confused, not understanding how someone can receive a ranking without even taking the test. Even so, no explanation is given. For now, the next to be called is Lucas Vix, who, upon seeing the special treatment given to Elijah, demands to be equally exempted from the test and to receive a ranking directly. The procurer presents the arrogant boy as an 11-year-old conjurer specializing in fire magic with a light orange mana core, something very tall for his age. Besides that, he has elf ears, which reminds Arthur of his moments in the elven lands. It turns out that Lucas, impatient with the formalities, summons his fiery guardian to attack the prosecutor. She defends herself using earth magic, raising a large block of stone between them. Lucas then plants his staff in the ground and unleashes a rain of fire over the arena. He smiles, convinced of his own power, but does not realize that he has lost control of the spell, and is about to set the whole arena on fire. Before chaos ensues, the prosecutor intervenes and resolves the situation, but even with the boy's recklessness, she acknowledges his talent for being able to summon such a powerful spell. However, as she prepares to announce his grade, Lucas tries to attack her by surprise in a desperate attempt to win the battle and improve his result. Realizing the danger, Arthur quickly throws his sword and deflects the attack, protecting the prosecutor. With a mere that resolved, the prosecutor gives the verdict. Lucas receives rank D. Knowing that the boy would likely cause more trouble, she uses her earth magic to summon a giant arm that removes him from the arena. Finally, it is Arthur's turn, or rather, note. Jasmine and Sylvie wish him good luck, cheering for him. Arthur descends into the arena, deciding not to hold back and release all of his hidden aura. The guildmaster, Caspian, senses the sudden increase in Arthur's aura and decides to intervene, announcing that he himself will conduct the boy's rank test. Caspian is a dual-ranked magician, undoubtedly the most powerful individual in the country. Even so, Arthur does not feel intimidated and charges into the fight. As their swords clash, the narrative jumps forward in time, and we see Arthur officially receiving his adventurer's letter with rank B. Meanwhile, in Caspian's office, the two examiners demand explanations for why so many children are receiving rank D. Caspian calmly reminds the two about the cultural exchange between the three races that took place 6 months ago, which now allows children of elves and dwarves to register as adventurers. In Lucas's case, he is half elf and should have received rank B, but due to his arrogance, he ended up with rank D. Elijah, on the other hand, is human, but was raised in the dwarf kingdom and had a powerful guarantor who endorsed his ability, which is why he received his rank without needing to go through tests. As for Arthur, or note, Caspian admits he has no idea who the boy really is. The only reason he received special treatment was because of Jasmine, who belongs to the family of the most powerful fire mages in the kingdom. One examiner even speculates that this is the reason Arthur can use such powerful fire magic. Caspian, however, is more intrigued by the boy's sword technique, noting that his movements lack some fluidity, as if his body has not yet adapted to his growth. Still, Arthur gave the guild master a run for his money, and for that reason, Caspian believes that if this masked boy is not carefully guided, he could become a terrifying threat in the future. Caspian finds himself lost in thought, surprised by the number of unexpected events of that day. Although not worried, he knows there is much to think about. Jasmine calls him back to reality. Noticing that he is distracted, he replies that everything is fine and there is nothing to worry about. Reflecting on everything, Arthur feels that he has become so accustomed to this world that everything he knew in his previous life no longer matters and is not even used by him. Now, he and Jasmine walk through the area and find Elijah, who approaches not to greet them, but to scold Arthur for interfering in Lucas's attack. Despite this, she admits that if Arthur had done nothing, she herself would have acted to stop Lucas. While they talk, Lucas sees them and feels excluded for being gathered without him, and shouts asking why they are having a meeting without inviting him. Arthur responds that there is no reason to invite someone who broke the rules. Furious, Lucas confronts Arthur and grabs him by the clothes, demanding a fight. Arthur could face him right there, but he realizes that they are already attracting attention. Some adult adventurers watch the scene, wondering why these children are acting like children. Arthur notices the gazes around and backs off, warning Lucas that they are being watched and that rumors are already circulating. Lucas then lets him go. They disperse, and as there is nothing else to do, Jasmine proposes that they take a walk. Arthur asks where to, and Jasmine quickly suggests a destination, leading them there. With a leap, they arrive at an area for beast passage, but the place is empty. Jasmine explains that it was recently cleaned, and now serves as a training ground for novice adventurers, where items for quests can also be collected. To Arthur, training in an empty place seems like a waste of time. However, Jasmine says they are going to another place, and that the walk will be long. She runs off, and Arthur has difficulty catching up with her, admitting he was wrong. He never thought Jasmine would be such a good runner. He realizes he made several judgment errors that day, and feels that something is wrong. He recalls the fight against Caspian, and how he noticed that the guildmaster was gradually increasing his speed, trying to force Arthur to reveal his ace. When he used his magic, Arthur made a miscalculation and ended up losing, hearing from Caspian that he shouldn't be arrogant. Then he wonders where exactly he went wrong, but there is no time to think too much, as a large monster appears right in front of them. Shocked, they watch as the creature devours a living person. Jasmine immediately warns that they need to run. This was not part of the plan. As they flee, she realizes that the monster had been captured alive by some adventurers, but managed to escape during transport and attacked everyone. Since the creature does not even belong to that region, Jasmine does not want to face it there and continues running. Unfortunately, the monster catches up to them and now plans to use them as a meal. Jasmine tells Arthur to run while she stays to face the beast. With 2 swords in hand, she attacks the monster, trying to surprise it by jumping and striking from above. However, it is she who ends up being surprised by a direct attack. The creature turns toward her, trying to eat her alive. Arthur, in desperation, screams her name and leaps to rescue her, carrying her in his arms away from danger. As soon as they land, all the injured adventurers look at them, trying to understand how strong they really are. Arthur gets ready to join the fight too, but then he hears a voice saying, "Not yet." The voice warns him that he needs to get it right this time. Jasmine, he has made mistakes and does not want to make another one. Jasmine watches and calls his name. It is then that Arthur jumps against an advancing monster, wielding his sword firmly. He delivers a series of blows until he defeats the creature. Relieved, he sighs, feeling that, finally, he is done. The guild arrives to rescue the injured adventurers, and Jasmine confirms that this time he got it right. She comments that he seemed calmer in this fight than in the previous one, but says that perhaps it was not her place to evaluate that. Sitting together, she starts to share more about herself, revealing that she became an adventurer to escape her family. Jasmine belongs to the Flamesfort family, known for producing several powerful fire element mages. When she discovered that the healing element her family used was the strongest, she was ecstatic. She awakened to magic very early, long before her siblings, which led her parents to have high expectations for her. However, upon realizing that she could not use the fire element, they deemed her useless. Hearing this, Arthur fills with rage, stands up, and shouts that no element is superior to another. What matters is how one uses the element they have. Jasmine laughs at his reaction, asking why he is so upset. Arthur then realizes that it touched him because he too was called useless in his past life and cannot stand to see someone else going through that. Jasmine continues saying that what he did today, she has also done with the members of the Twin Horn group. They constantly regretted, saying she needed to learn to work in a team, but she acknowledges that everything she is today she owes to them. They corrected her, helped her grow, treated her, and trained her. She asks what Arthur thinks about that, but he does not respond. Jasmine eventually falls asleep, and he stays there, watching her, thinking about himself. Could he also change like her? He cannot say. He thinks about the things that have changed since he arrived in that world. His parents' friends he met, Teichi, Elenera, and so many others. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could also change. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Teichi watches Arthur through a magical glass. Without permission, she looks away when she sees him with a woman and tries to touch him through the glass, but cannot. Infuriated, she complains that he is always with women. He turns to see her and asks why she did that. Realizing her jealousy, he suggests that if she is envious of Arthur exploring new experiences, she should also do the same. Thus, he hands her a book which she eagerly takes to distract herself and occupy her time. 2 years pass. Arthur continues his travels and adventures alongside Jasmine. His fame has now spread throughout the city. Some men comment on his strength and confirm that he is Jasmine's travel partner, the masked swordsman. Arthur is sitting on the rooftop when Jasmine appears and calls him to come down. He obeys, and together, they set off for another mission. They make a formidable duo. When they arrive at the mission site, Jasmine instructs them to inform the guild that they lost contact with a village near the Buzius pasture and that they will investigate the reason. Then, she asks Note what the mission's priority is, and he responds that it is to survive. Next, she inquires what to do if they encounter hostile beasts. He says that is not part of the job, so they can simply ignore it. Satisfied with the answers, Jasmine affirms that he is approved. Shortly after, Note communicates telepathically with Sylvie and asks what she will do. She replies that she will be training nearby, and if they need her, they just have to call. As soon as Sylvie moves away, Jasmine and Note head towards the mission area, and on the way, she asks if he noticed anything strange. Note observes that there are many footprints leading towards the village, but almost none returning. Realizing the danger, they use wind magic to reach the location faster. Upon arrival, they find a frightening scene with no sign of the residents. They begin to suspect an attack by beasts. Suddenly, they spot ice crystals scattered around, and as they approach, they realize that there are frozen people inside them. Shortly after, they find a child still alive and ask what happened, but she says she doesn't know, as she was in the forest gathering Rusko. Note suspects it is the work of a beast, and Jasmine confirms, but she also notices something strange about the girl. As they look closer, they notice something stuck to her leg, and suddenly, the girl is violently pulled towards the creature. Note tries to move forward to save her, but Jasmine stops him, telling him not to act impulsively. The beast then freezes the girl in front of them. With no alternative, Jasmine orders an immediate retreat. Meanwhile, in a mysterious room, two hooded figures discuss a possible alliance between humans and dwarves, which is undesirable for them. The older woman uses magic, revealing the image of Note, Jasmine, and other adventurers, and the man comments that he thought the mission would be boring, but now it is becoming interesting. Back in the field, Note asks what that creature was, and Jasmine explains that it is an arachne, one of the 5 beasts she hates facing the most. He asks if she has fought one before, and she replies that yes, 5 times, but she only won once, revealing that in their only victory, all the team members were present, including Alice, and that they only won because of her. Jasmine then explains that only emitters can remove the curse from a spider. Other than that, the only way to break it is by defeating the creature. Moreover, they have extremely high resistance, are little affected by magic, have a hard body that repels swords, and hate the sun, preferring the deeper parts of dungeons. After this, Jasmine looks at Arthur and says she has taught him everything she could about being an adventurer, and asks what they should do now. Arthur replies that the best option is to retreat, inform the guild, and come back prepared to save the village. Jasmine agrees, but suddenly the spider appears behind them. It launches a direct attack at Arthur, and Jasmine jumps in front to protect him. However, she ends up getting frozen in the process. The creature slowly advances toward Arthur, who at that moment begins to remember everything he has lost: his parents, his fellow adventurers, and even Sylvie. The spider then attacks Arthur, who manages to defend himself with his sword, and then it shoots several webs in his direction, but he repels them all with precision, while remembering that in his past life, he was a king known as the most powerful, someone who won battles with a single sword stroke. Then he advances and drives his blade into the creature's neck, but cannot pierce it, dodging quickly from a counterattack and delivering several successive blows. However, the spider continues to resist, trying to attack him again, but Arthur dodges and realizes that just physical attacks won't be enough. He then envelops his sword in flames and attacks once more, finally managing to injure it. For a moment, he believes he has won, but the creature reacts immediately, forcing him to retreat. Realizing then that fighting only with magic won't be easy either, he decides to change tactics and uses earth magic to try to lift it from the ground and hit its head. However, the wound regenerates quickly. Still, the damage was enough to irritate it, causing it to charge at him fiercely. At that moment, Arthur drives his sword into the spider's head and questions if it has ever been attacked with magic from the inside out. Releasing a powerful lightning attack through the blade, the creature falls into despair and tries to flee, but Arthur plunges his second sword into it and further increases the power of the lightning, finally managing to defeat it, or at least that's what he thinks. As before dying, the spider uses its power to freeze him, but Arthur activates his crossbow skill, stopping time for a moment, and delivers multiple consecutive blows until he tears off the creature's head, ending the battle. After
that exhaustion hits him hard. He realizes that, despite perfectly recalling the sword techniques from when he was the strongest king, his current body cannot keep up. Falling to the ground, he understands that he needs to train more. At that moment, Silvio runs to him, worried, and asks if he is okay. He replies that he is now. Then she wishes him good luck and, when asking with what, points behind him, where Jasmine appears clearly irritated. Arthur apologizes for not following the plan and
for fighting the spider, saying he was carried away by the emotion of the moment. Jasmine responds that since he acknowledges the mistake, it's all right, and even congratulates him for having defeated the creature alone. But Arthur states that he is still far from the power he wants to achieve, as he needs to protect those he loves, and believes that by becoming stronger, he will be able to protect the important people to him. Jasmine agrees, but warns that he cannot put himself in danger, as Alice and her family would be devastated if something happened to him. Therefore, he should not act recklessly. However, Arthur responds that this is impossible, as she is also someone very important to him, leaving Jasmine embarrassed. She comments that his charm is getting better and thanks him for saving her. Then Arthur remembers that they need to remove the mana core from the spider, but when they look, they realize that Silvio is already devouring it. At the same time, the villagers return to normal. Later that night at the guild, one of the adventurers is impressed to learn that they defeated an arachnid, but Note says it was just luck. Luca is suspicious and questions whether it was really an arachnid, as these creatures live in the depths of dungeons and rarely appear on the surface. Then, Note asks what he needs to believe, and Lucas asks to see the core, but Note responds that he couldn't recover it, suggesting that they may have confused it with a giant spider. Then Note reveals the head of the spider, leaving everyone in shock. Still, Lucas, unwilling to admit it, claims that creature wouldn't stand a chance against him either. Note sarcastically says he'll ask for his help next time, causing the elf to leave. Shortly after, Jasmine says it's time to leave, and when they ask where they will go, Note replies that they will return for a while to the city they came from. Next, we see Arthur returning home, being hugged by Eleanor. His parents ask him to tell about his adventures, and he says he defeated a spider. His father is impressed, while his mother scolds him for putting himself in danger. His father recalls that the entire group had difficulty defeating one of those creatures even once, and nearly died in the other attempts. He then asks how Arthur managed to defeat it, and he explains that, since it is extremely resilient, he concentrated all the attacks on a single point. He used magic from the inside out. Then his mother makes everyone kneel and reminds them of the promise not to put themselves in danger. Still, they forgive him. Alice comments that they should have run away since arachnids are among the 5 strongest and hardest creatures to face. Note tries to explain that Jasmine was not at fault for what happened since Arthur made the decision to fight alone, and because of that, they both apologize. Then Alice responds, reminding him that when he decided to become an adventurer, he promised not to do anything reckless, and that Jasmine would ensure he learned everything correctly, saying this was the only reason she allowed him to follow that path. But still, he ended up facing something extremely dangerous. His father then emphasizes that next time, he must obey Jasmine's instructions. Arthur agrees, acknowledging his mistake. Then Note asks about the spider, and Jasmine replies that she has already informed the guild and that they will investigate the situation. He thanks her and says he will inform Eleanor and the others to be careful. Then Note asks Alice to calm down, saying that despite Arthur doing something dangerous, he managed to come back alive. That is already a reason to celebrate. Later outside, we see Arthur and Jasmine training. He comments that he ended up getting a huge scolding, and Jasmine replies that the one who is truly scary is Alice. Arthur agrees and says that next time they need to avoid upsetting her. Shortly after, they start a sword training session without using magic. The speed of both is so absurd that it leaves their parents completely shocked as they watch. While fighting, Arthur thinks to himself that he still needs more power to protect those he loves. When the training ends, he gets distracted. Sylvie notices and asks what is happening. Arthur replies that he just remembered someone, and, in his thoughts, reflects that this person was like the wind, wondering what she was doing at that moment. And then, the scene shifts, showing Tercia running desperately from a huge rock that is rolling towards her. She manages to leap at the last moment before being crushed and complains that no one warned her that it would be this insane. An elven voice echoes saying that humans are terrifying creatures who take lives, massacre the elven people, steal their goods, and destroy their dignity, something that has been taught to them since childhood. However, everything changes when she meets a different human. We have Tessia in a bar, while some humans stare at her. A member of her group asks what the mission is, and she responds that they must eliminate a boar. When asked about the location, she says it will be in human territory. Another member complains, asking if her grandfather thinks they are some kind of jack of all trades. The others agree, saying that in the end, that is exactly what they seem to be. As they are leaving, a human tries to provoke them by putting his foot in front, but Tasia knocks him down with a kick. Another tries to throw a drink, but is also easily defeated. Soon, all the humans in the bar advance towards them. However, an elf creates a water barrier, allowing the group to leave without problems. Tatia comments that no matter where they go, they always find people like that. The girl with purple hair says she wishes it would stop, while the blonde elf advises to ignore them. Shortly after, a carriage arrives, and they board it. Inside, there are 3 elves and 3 humans, and Tetsia begins to read a letter from her grandfather, explaining that humans, elves, and dwarves have spent a long time at war. As she reads, bandits appear trying to rob the carriage, but are quickly defeated by both the elves and the human adventurers. The letter continues to say that, thanks to the alliance between the 3 kingdoms, the war has come to an end, but this is nothing more than a political agreement. During the night, the carriage is attacked again, and once more they manage to defend themselves. The letter warns that as long as the hearts of the people remain in conflict, the alliance will never be true. In an unexpected moment, even the human adventurers and the coachman try to attack the elves but are defeated by Tasia. Back in the mysterious room, the woman who was observing the adventurers now turns her attention to Tasia's group. She releases wolves and decides that they will proceed on foot. Tasia suggests they hide their ears, but another member says it would be useless, as sooner or later they would be discovered. Upon arriving at the mission location, the village chief claims he does not need the help of the elves and sends the group away. The scene then shifts to Arthur, who reflects on Lucas, a member of an influential family in the kingdom of Sepim. He did not expect such an important lineage to have elven blood, especially being an enemy race. Intrigued, he wonders why. Lucas then confronts Elijah, questioning why a human is involved with the royal family of the dwarves. Elijah responds that there are several reasons, but also questions if Lucas has elven blood. Lucas reveals that for the Wicks family, the most important thing is to produce powerful wizards. At that moment, Arthur intervenes, stating that his family is even willing to welcome an elf, all to achieve greater control over humans, even if it means mingling with a race considered an enemy. Lucas comments that it is not right to eavesdrop on others' conversations, while Arthur thinks that Lucas's family possesses a somewhat progressive mindset, or perhaps just an unyielding determination, willing to use any means necessary to gain power. Lucas then states that he intends to use this power to ensure that no wizard on the continent of Caton is stronger than he is, saying that this is the duty of all who are born into the Wicks family. Arthur wishes him good luck, observing that Lucas's goals seem to differ from his own, since he does not feel the need to become the most powerful, and soon after leaves, asking what the next mission will be. The scene then returns to Tatia, who continues trying to interact with the humans, but to no avail, as everyone, without exception, ignores her. One of the girls in her group comments that she really tried, but the reaction is always the same. Meanwhile, the blonde elf observes that they would probably do the same with humans who came to the Elven Kingdom. However, Tasia thinks that they could at least listen to what they have to say. Until at that moment, a nut hits her forehead, and she realizes that it was 2 children. She then approaches them and asks what they want. The little boy says that if she is hunting the boar, it came from the east, causing Tasia to thank him for the information. While the purple-haired girl questions why they are helping her, the little girl replies that it is a problem for everyone, then asks if they will defeat the monster for her. Tasia confirms, saying that he will defeat the boar for the children, but the boy is puzzled by the fact that he managed to hit us and questions whether the elves are weak. However, Haterfia denies this, claiming she was just distracted. Back in the strange room, the old woman asks if Haterfia is the next little toy, and the old man confirms, saying he has no interest in her as an individual, only in the fact that she is the princess of the kingdom of Eleanor, questioning whether this would be enough to cause a rift in the alliance and revealing that he prepared a gift for her. Returning, a huge boar, Tasia, charges in their direction, lifting stones as it goes, leaving the group shocked by its size. And as it advances, they dodge, and Tasia begins to use wind magic, while the blonde boy uses water magic and the girl with purple hair uses earth magic, believing for a moment that they have defeated it, but soon realize that the boar remains unscathed. Then, Tess warns her, Faye, not to get distracted, and even with new attacks, the monster blocks everything, making the group realize that it is immune to magic, which leads them to flee in desperation. In the strange room, the old man comments that elves are skilled in the use of mana, but but have fragile bodies. He questions what would happen if the elven princess died in human territory, while Tessia continues trying to attack, but her blows are rendered useless, reinforcing that magic does not work. And as they retreat to a wall, the boar attacks with full force. They manage to dodge, but debris hits Viu, who falls to the ground, prompting Tessia to shout for her to run, while Faye uses water magic to rescue her, suggesting a retreat, which Viu agrees with. But Tessia insists on trying again, and after asking if she has a plan, Faye agrees to help her, but asks that she fall back if it goes wrong. Then he uses his water magic to lure the boar, complaining about having to serve as bait, running towards Viu, who creates a hole in the ground with earth magic, causing the boar to fall in. Next, Tessia uses her wind magic to launch chunks of the ground at the monster, believing they have finally won, but soon they hear a roar. The boar jumps out of the hole, even angrier, forcing Tessia to save Faye and Viu. With her magic fading and at that moment, thinking of Arthur and the moments they spent together, Faye uses her water magic to pull her away and orders her to retreat immediately. However, Tessia refuses, remembering that when Arthur was in the Elven realm, he taught her how to acquire mana. Tessia's hands begin to glow brightly, and Viu wonders where all that mana is coming from. At that moment, Cecilia opens her eyes and sees the boar charging toward her. She gets ready, while Faye and Viu scream for her to run away, but instead, she channels the mana in her hand and delivers a physical blow with all her strength, knocking the boar down, leaving everyone shocked. Faye wonders if that was some kind of physical enhancement with mana, while Cecilia complains that her hand hurts, and Viu scolds her, asking her not to do something so reckless again. Back in the mysterious room, the old woman comments that it was a pity, and the old man says that Tessia is more skilled than he expected, claiming they will need to prepare an even more powerful mana crossbow. Returning to the village, Cecilia informs them that they defeated the boar, but the elder simply turns his back and walks away without thanking them, making Faye comment not to expect good manners from humans. Then Viu asks Tessia what she thinks about that, but soon they see the two children who had helped them, and they thank them for defeating the monster. Tessia asks if that is their home, and they confirm, explaining that, before, another person lived there, but left, and they say that the former resident was very strong, making Tessia comment that she knows someone like that too. Back in the Elven realm, her grandfather turns and says that she made him break into a cold sweat, while a friend asks how she is doing. He replies that the problem has apparently been solved. The school principal states that she expected nothing less from his granddaughter, but Virium says it was not just that, but rather that she was lucky to have a good friend, leaving the principal curious about who it might be, and he replies that it's someone she knows well, saying that a small encounter can change the world, while remembering when she met Cynthia during a war between humans and elves. Back at the bar, Tessia comments that she and Faye will return to Shiro's and asks what Viu intends to do. She replies that she will return to Eleanor, but will also take the opportunity to see Arthur, which leaves Tessia surprised, asking how she knows him. Viu explains that it's nothing special. They studied together in shooting, while Faye adds that they meet from time to time. Viu praises Alice, saying she is very pretty. Faye comments that last time they got candies and they need to bring something in return, also mentioning that his sister is very cute and that Reynolds is an amplifier. This makes Tessia pout, complaining that she also wanted to see Arthur, but didn't even know he was in Shiro's, thinking it unfair that only they can see him. Soon after, we see Tessia in front of Arthur's house, excited to finally be able to see him, thinking about what she should say, and rehearsing different ways to introduce herself, until his mother appears asking if she can help, which startles her and makes her apologize and run away, confused about who that woman was and wondering where Arthur is. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Arthur ends up shipwrecked on a mysterious island. When he gets up, he grabs his mask and remembers that, while sailing with Jasmine, a strong storm capsized the sea boat, causing the two to separate. He runs desperately looking for her, but ends up finding Lucas and Elijah, being visibly disappointed as he expected to find her. Jasmine, which ends up offending both of them greatly. Arthur remembers that he had accepted a mission from the Hellster, but ended up being separated from Jasmine because of the storm. What he doesn't understand is, why the hell are Lucas and Elijah there? Then, Elijah explains that he was carrying out a guild mission involving several fishing boats that were disappearing, and that he ended up getting caught by the storm while investigating Lucas. In turn, mocks the two, saying that he finds it difficult to believe that they are also high-ranking adventurers like him. As they ended up trapped in a storm, they are really pathetic. Still, both Arthur and Elijah think that Lucas went through the same situation Arthur, then shows the boat he was on with Jasmine and demonstrates that he is worried about her. Even so, now the most important thing is to find some boat, because if he survived, then Jasmine must also be alive. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Sylvie is, as always, being greedy, devouring mana stones from monsters. However, her lunch is interrupted by Arthur, who communicates telepathically with her and asks for help in finding Jasmine, suggesting a location for where to start the search. On the other hand, Jasmine is desperate, looking for Arthur. She feels extremely worried and, at the same time, guilty. She remembers a conversation with Reynolds in which he commented that just as they encountered Rennet, many other A-rank mana beasts began to appear in low-level missions, and that this type of occurrence was becoming more and more frequent. They began to suspect whether the guild was misevaluating the missions, and in addition, the treaty between the three kingdoms was also complicating things a lot. Reynolds raised the hypothesis that someone against the treaty could be causing these incidents. His father sincerely wanted Arthur to stop being an adventurer. However, Jasmine knew that Arthur was unlikely to do this, and Reynolds was also fully aware of this. Therefore, he asked Jasmine, given the current situation, to take very good care of his daughter, son. And now she finds herself in this extremely worrying situation. During her search, Jasmine ends up encountering Lucas's guards, who inform her that they were sent by the royal family of Sapin and are worried about the young man, although it seems more like they are afraid of what might happen to them if they don't find him. Meanwhile, Lucas uses his dimensional ring to summon a tent, but orders the others to assemble, since he already did his part by bringing it. Arthur ends up assembling everything, while thinking that even low-level dimensional rings cost thousands of gold coins, reason why he doesn't have one. Soon after, Lucas complains that he is hungry. When Arthur asks if there is no food in his ring, his reaction makes it clear that there is not. The others conclude that the supplies were probably with the guards, so Arthur decides to go fishing, getting a large quantity of fish. Then he tells Lucas to cook, but the boy refuses, claiming that he shouldn't stoop to that. So, Arthur teases, saying that he should be the most skilled at cooking, since he supposedly has the best control of fire magic. With that, Lucas accepts the challenge just to prove his point, but he ends up demonstrating that he doesn't know how to cook fish, and Arthur needs to warn him to stop burning everything, or they would be left without dinner. After several attempts, finally Lucas manages to prepare the fish. He is excited with the result, but is completely ignored by the others. Later, while they are having dinner, Arthur observes the scene and remembers when eating with his family. His thoughts are interrupted by Elijah, and he is surprised to see that Arthur can eat even while wearing the mask. Thus, night arrives, and, in the depths of the island, inside a dark cave, a mysterious creature is revealed. The next day, during breakfast, Arthur comments that while he was looking for food the day before, he took the opportunity to explore the entire island and realized that they are completely isolated. All the other boats are also destroyed, which means they can only wait for rescue or find a way back on their own. However, Lucas claims that neither of these options will work. He reveals the true objective of their mission, a mana beast capable of controlling the weather, even on a small scale, and if they find this creature, it will be the end. The three then understand that both fishing boats and their own vessels were destroyed by this monster. Arthur asks for more information, and Lucas explains that the creature usually builds nests near the water and dominates the entire area around it, which means that she must be somewhere on the island. He declares that when he finds her, he will reduce her to ashes and prepares to leave, but Arthur stops him, suggesting that the three of them go together, since this way they can defeat her more quickly. Lucas accepts, but makes it clear that they must not get in his way. Meanwhile, Jasmine continues looking for Arthur until she is found by Silvio, who starts making gestures, trying to communicate, although Jasmine doesn't understand anything at first. Let's face it, who would? But after some effort, she manages to interpret the message, and finally feels relieved to discover that Arthur is still alive. In turn, the boys are already at the entrance to the cave, where Lucas asks them to observe and admire his majestic power. Fire into the cave in order to draw the monster's attention, while Elijah quickly creates an earthen wall to protect them from the rubble. When the smoke clears, a strong tremor shakes the cave location, and, without wasting time, they start running. The cave is completely destroyed, and from inside it appears a gigantic, monstrous salamander. Lucas panics when he sees that creature, so Arthur intervenes, blocks the monster's attack, and tells her that he will distract her while the others prepare a more powerful attack. Elijah takes over the defense, covering Arthur with his earth magic. While he advances, Lucas manages to land a strong blow, but the monster barely reacts. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Arthur attacks him and manages to injure him, while Lucas hits 2 fireballs in a row. Even so, the creature continues as if nothing had happened. Scared, Lucas begins to attack desperately, While Lydia continues to protect the two, Arthur notices that the cuts he makes on the monster regenerate quickly, and at the same time, he is impressed by the characteristics of this world. Then warn him that it's time to change strategy. Now, Lucas starts attacking you from a distance, but he's insecure, as he doesn't know who will protect him if the monster counterattacks. Lydia questions Arthur if he is sure of the plan, and he responds that it is worth trying, since he doesn't have many options. Arthur then blocks all of the salamander's attacks, and even provokes Lucas, asking if that one is really the power of the supposedly most powerful family of wizards. Angry, Lucas begins to attack with everything he has, repeatedly, making his magic collide with the monster's blows. Meanwhile, Arthur protects Elia so he can get close enough. At the right moment, Arthur advances on the creature's head and orders Elia to do his part. Without hesitation, he uses his earth magic to prevent the salamander's regeneration, attacking the wound directly. Seeing that the strategy works, the three continue to cooperate in this way, and after some time, they finally manage to defeat the monster. As always, Lucas begins to boast about his powerful magic. However, when he lets his guard down, the salamander rises again, ready to devour them. At the same time, Jasmine runs at high speed over the sea, using his wind magic. The moment Arthur finally sees her, the salamander has its head ripped off in a single blow. Jasmine arrives soon after and runs to hug him, relieved to see him safe and sound. Elia and Lucas are completely impressed by the power of a dual-rank adventurer. Later at dusk, Arthur thanks Jasmine for having saved him, which makes her blush. However, the moment is interrupted by Silvio, who is running away from the others after stealing the monster's mana core. Unfortunately, it is already too late to stop. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Tessia is disappointed at not being able to find Arthur. She comments to the others that they never managed to meet, but they imply that it happens because she is a coward. She replies angrily that it's not that, and decides to prove it, but when she tries to leave, she is interrupted by Fail, who reminds her to pay her share. Before grumbling, she returns, pays, and then goes on her way. Later, upon reaching the entrance of the house, she tries to gather the courage to knock on the door, but is surprised by Reynolds, and, without thinking twice, he runs off. Reynolds realizes that the girl was an elf, but instead of being surprised, he is excited to notice the presence of other races in circulation, which indicates that the treaty is working. However, elsewhere, those who oppose the treaty watch everything as if it were a game, realizing that the mana beasts they are unleashing are fulfilling their purpose. Paper. Still, one of them believes that this is not enough, and states that they need to find a creature powerful enough for the planned day. In turn, after delivering the mission, Arthur comments to Jasmine that it was surprising to see her run like that, and she reveals that she actually learned that from him. She just used her mana on her legs while they were talking. However, they are interrupted by a guy called Browd, a double-ranked adventurer. He tells Jasmine that he is there because he wants to borrow her strength to look for extraordinary treasure. Jasmine approaches to talk to him, while Arthur thinks that that guy must be quite strong to be a double-rank adventurer, and the detail is that when the man approaches Jasmine for some reason, this makes him uneasy later. At home, Arthur starts training with Adam, and before the fight, he remembers the first time he dueled him. When he attacks Arthur, he counterattacks, showing that he is no longer a child. The fight remains balanced, and Arthur recognizes that Adam is a great fighter. He can dodge and block his attacks, so Adam decides to use his secret technique, but Arthur manages to predict it and block it, receiving praise since no one had been able to stop that attack for a long time. Adam says that he has become much stronger, and Arthur thanks him. However, the rest of the Twin Horns group appears to reprimand Adam for having exaggerated too much. He responds that they themselves saw that Arthur is not another little monster. Now it's a real monster. Arthur reassures everyone by saying that his hand just felt a little numb. Angela comments to Alice that it's impressive that she doesn't get mad at Adam, but Alice responds that she only gets angry when Arthur does dangerous things without her being able to see him, besides that it was training and that's how it should be done. Helen warns that now it's time to train Bow, then wind magic with Angela, and finally earth magic with Durden. Arthur is grateful for being able to train with double-rank adventurers, and in the meantime, Reynolds is a little anxious because would like to participate in his son's training but is meeting with Jasmine, who asks if he knows Broad. Reynolds replies that he is a dual-rank adventurer. Here he always takes on the most important role, dangerous to attract enemy attacks, yet he completed many missions almost without taking damage. They say he is known by several nicknames, and he is a very nice person. Reynold admits that even he would have difficulty breaking Broad's shield. He asks if something happened, and Jasmine says that she was invited to a mission. Reynold thinks strange, since Broad already has his own group. Jasmine also found it strange as she was not the only guest. They suspect that he may have had problems with his previous team, or that the mission be especially dangerous. Jasmine decides to investigate further, and Reynold asks her to take care of Arthur. In the meantime, Arthur is exhausted after training with everyone. Reynold approaches and asks if he has already finished the warm-up, as now it would be his turn. But Alice and Eleanor say that the training is already over, leaving Reynold sad for missing the chance to spend time with his son. Arthur asks about Jasmine, and Reynolds explains that she went out to investigate something. Alice and Eleanor take the opportunity to say that now it's time for Arthur to spend time with them. Meanwhile, Lucas's guards are looking for missions, but they only find average tasks, and Lucas rejects them all as not worthy the recent problems involving mana beasts that killed many adventurers. He gets frustrated because he wanted to complete one big mission before entering Cyrus Academy. At that moment, one mysterious man named Chun appears and asks if he knows Brow, who is recruiting members to explore one high-level dungeon still undiscovered, planning to do it without the guild's knowledge. He claims that, with their power, they would be able to complete it quickly. Lucas shows interest, but his subordinates warn about the danger of accepting missions not approved by the guild. He tells everyone to be quiet and praises Chun, saying that he initially thought he was just another guard, but that he ended up proving useful. Lucas decides to go and apply while Chun smiles mischievously. On the other hand, Arthur accompanies his mother and sister to buy clothes, thinking this is worse than fighting magical beasts. At the same time, Tessia is also in the city, being teased by Faye and Bio for not having the courage to go and see Arthur. Angry, she says that when she becomes queen, she will expel them from the kingdom of elves. Despite this, Tessia regrets not being able to see her loved one but maintains hope. Faith asks if any mission has come up, and Tessia responds that they need to wait for the investigation into the mana beasts to end while they talk. You notice that Arthur is on the other side of the street and tells Tessia to look, but at the moment, as she turns around, a carriage passes in front, causing her to miss the chance to see him. And now we see that Arthur is in a magical materials store looking for a dimensional ring, meets Helen and Angela, and asks how much will fit in the cheapest ring. But Helen comments that not even her bow would fit in one of those, then shows another ring in which everything needed to fit would fit. Camping, however, is very expensive at the moment. Alice and Eleanor enter the store, furious with Arthur, as that bastard ran away from them at dusk. Back at the Helster house, Silvio asks why he looks so tired, and Arthur responds that it was because he spent quality time with his family that they really know how to exhaust him. Sylvie then asks when the adventures will return, but Arthur explains that they will have to wait a little because now he needs to get ready. She complains, saying that she is starving for magical cores. Arthur understands that if he wants to feed her well, he will have to leave on adventures because buying cores would bankrupt him, yet he remembers that it has been 2 years and that he will only be an adventurer until he can enter the Syros Academy. That is, he is getting closer to fulfilling this promise, and the next mission will probably be the last one. He wonders what Jasmine thinks about this, and goes to find her when he enters the room. Jasmine is embarrassed. Because he sees her in a dress, she tries to compose herself while Alice tells Arthur that that outfit was a gift in gratitude for everything Jasmine did for him, and how Arthur learned to praise women when trying on clothes. He says that Jasmine looks adorable, leaving her even more embarrassed to the point that she runs away later. Arthur asks what she intends to do about the Broad's invitation. Jasmine responds that she honestly shouldn't accept, because she found out that he intends to attack a dungeon on his own, that is, without his main group. Yet she realizes that Arthur wants to participate because this is clear in his eyes. Arthur reflects that the right thing to do would always be to avoid danger, but he also recognizes that it was precisely when facing him that he had important encounters, such as when he met Sylvie after the bandit attack and Tessia. After saving her, he feels that avoiding danger also means close to the world. So he tells Jasmine that he isn't sure if they should go either, but thinking that this could be the last mission they do together, he wants it to be something more memorable than just collecting herbs. Jasmine remembers that life comes first, but agrees that it would be boring to do something so simple. In the end, they decide to accept the mission. The next day, they say goodbye to everyone before leaving. Reynold asks them to return safely, and they use the portal to reach their destination. Arthur also says goodbye to Sylvie, as she doesn't like damp caves and prefers to go out hunting monsters to feed on in the meantime elsewhere. One hooded man uses dark magic to control one extremely powerful mana beast so strong that not even he can dominate it completely, yet he leaves. Everything ready for his plans to go perfectly. Then we see Arthur and Jasmine going to the mission location. When they arrive, they find Elijah and Lucas already present. One of the adventurers introduces himself as Rednold, a rank increaser. Then Creole, Oliver, and Samantha introduce themselves, all of rank. Arthur realizes that Oliver's stone is the same as the ones his mother put in his gloves. This makes him calmer. Here, it's comforting to have a transmitter in the group. Soon after, he introduces himself as Nut, also a rank increaser, while Jasmine introduces himself as a rank increaser. Shortly after, the group leader arrives. He introduces himself as Browd, another rank increaser. When he notices Arthur and Jasmine's luggage, he asks if they don't have a dimensional ring. They both confirm that they don't. Then, Elijah offers to keep their belongings in their own ring. As there is still space, they accept. With everything ready, it is time to start the mission. The group begins to enter the dungeon. Arthur remembers when Browd was talked to him and Jasmine, explaining that in the deepest level of the dungeon, there was a huge magical stone, a megalith capable of amplifying the power. Magical and provide different types of energy. He said that, therefore, he was gathering skilled adventurers. Lucas and Elijah had recommended the two, as they would also participate in the mission back to the present. Arthur reflects that he agreed to participate not only out of interest, but also out of concern for Lucas and Elijah, in case something went wrong. One of the adventurers asks Lucas and Elijah why Elijah being in that group. Lucas responds that he heard that Browd was gathering elite adventurers, while Elijah states that his motive is the same. Creation asks if they are not interested in money. Lucas responds that this is not a problem for him. Samantha adds, saying that he is not there for money either, but rather to complete a dungeon and gain prestige. Now Rednold comments that he is there for the money, just like Creation. A few moments later, they arrive at the dungeon entrance and begin to advance. The leader explains that he has already made prior reconnaissance. Of the local, Rednold asks if he managed to get to the bottom and if he knows the way, but Browd denies it, saying he couldn't go that far. Still, he assures that, at first, they shouldn't find it. Problems. Although it mentions rumors that immortal creatures inhabit that dungeon, everyone is shocked by the information. Browdy also explains that there are no mana monsters there. This means that for loot, you won't gain anything from that. The place is known as the Terrifying Cemetery. He asks everyone to fight as efficiently as possible without wasting mana. Reginald comments that there is no sign movement of monsters, but Broad reassures him, stating that there are no creatures in that place. Lucas, in turn, finds it all boring. However, soon after, several monsters appear in the ceiling of the cave. Broad identifies the creatures as Brattoners. The number is enormous. They quickly advance towards Samantha. Jasmine manages to save her in time. Immediately, everyone takes over combat positions and begin to face the Order, defeating countless monsters. Rednold asks Browd if there were that many monsters when he did the reconnaissance. He replies no. Before additionally, Arthur asks Lucas to take the front line with a fire spell. Saying he will provide support, Lucas then casts powerful fire magic. He eliminates most of the monsters at once. Arthur thanks him, but comments that he exaggerated the power. Without wasting time, Browd orders them to continue advancing before the creatures revive. Shortly afterwards, the group arrives at a cliff, with no way to the other side. The leader then asks Elijah to create a ladder on the cliff. While Elijah responds promptly, and everyone descends carefully. Below, Claude comments that, if he is not mistaken, there must be a passage ahead that leads to the deeper floor. Samantha questions if he has really been there before. He confirms, saying that last time the passage was exactly at that point. The group continues advancing, and Jasmine warns Arthur not to waste mana. Suddenly, Samantha steps on a rock and activates a trap. At the last moment, Arthur manages to save her. Reginald then questions why Browd didn't warn him about the trap. Surprised, Browd is visibly shocked, stating that the man who hired him never mentioned the existence of traps in that location. He then remembers the conversation with this man. The man offered him a generous reward and asked him to gather several skilled adventurers. When Broad asked about the dungeon, the man ensured that there were no traps. He said that the monsters were no big deal. He only mentioned that they were immortal. Furthermore, he provided a map detailing the path to the deepest floor. He asks the boys to advance carefully. The detail is that, as they advance a little further, they begin to feel an intense heat. He mentions that there is something strange in that place. For his part, Arthur manages to feel that further ahead, there is a great pressure. Between the rocks, steam begins to come out, followed by a strong tremor. Reginald asks Bart if he really explored that place before leaving. He doesn't know how to respond, which makes Ray angry. However, at that moment, a huge earthworm appears at the scene. Bakri attacks quickly with his water magic, but the worm escapes. Reginald, in turn, orders Broad to tell the truth once and for all. He confesses that the client told him in complete detail what the dungeon was like and even showed him a map. He already counted on the fast bats, but not with that worm and the traps. He mentions that it is quite strange that, suddenly in a dungeon, a new species of beast appears. Although Arthur, for your part, think that they certainly hid this information from the beginning, the detail is that they don't know for what purpose. At that moment, we see that Oliver approaches Samantha to ask her to follow him. You can tell Broad is lying. If they continue like this, they will become the monsters. Lunch. Now the best they can do is take the opportunity while they fight the worm to go straight to the treasure. Samantha is undecided. Although Oliver holds her hand and takes her with him, Arthur orders them to wait. Oliver makes it clear that he does not intend to die with people like them. However, Arthur goes behind Samantha and asks Lucas to take charge of protecting them. Without hesitation, Lucas creates an energy field. Meanwhile, Arthur recommends that Oliver enter at once. He replies no, intends to die with them. The detail is that, at that moment, the ground collapses. Samantha tries to protect him, but it's too late. Oliver ends up turning into pure bone. Arthur doesn't think about wasting that stone in the center, so he runs to get it and throws it to Samantha so she can exchange the gem in his stick for the one that will increase his power much more. Then, he warns the others that they need to leave that place as soon as possible. The worm doesn't think about letting them go. Crew advances against him, but the worm. It is on fire and evaporates all the water. Elijah and Samantha attack. Together, Samantha manages to stun him while he restrains him with his stone chains. However, it is still not enough. So, Broud warns Reginald and Yasmin that they need to attack together. Jasmine and Broud take charge of getting his attention so that Reginald can land a powerful blow on his forehead. Meanwhile, Arthur and Lucas must look for a weak point. Arthur realizes that fire magic is not enough to defeat that worm, so he will have to look for an even more intense fire. For his part, Reginald succeeds landing a huge hammer blow to the forehead, while Jasmine continues cutting the worm. But it's still not enough, so Arthur lights up his swords and charges at him. And now, everyone attacking together manages to cause much more damage. While Lucas continues to tremble with fear, the worm attacks him, but luckily Arthur manages to save him. Jasmine cuts him again. As the worm is not won, it runs away from the place. Broad shouts for Lucas to attack him. However, he is completely terrified, so the worm manages to escape. The boys think that at least this will give them enough time to get out of that place. The detail is that the worm wasn't running away, but rather biding its time until the eruption. Arthur shouts for Lucas to create the force field quickly. However, he is crying in fear. So, with no other options, Arthur jumps to protect him. The lava begins to consume everything, but luckily, the boys manage to protect themselves, with the exception of Brow, who ends up without an arm when protecting Samantha. A while later, Arthur takes charge of cauterizing her wound. When finished, Brow offers one of his sandwiches. He comments that it is delicious, and Crew responds that it is a Clara's recipe. His fiancé Arthur then asks if he wanted the mission reward for opening a bakery with his fiancé. He responds that it's something like that. However, on the other hand, Lucas is arguing with Brow. He only accepted this mission because supposedly the leader was a veteran enhancer of double rank, but now their leader is mutilated and they no longer have a transmitter. Brow responds that if he is like this, it is his fault for not having created the barrier. However, before the situation gets worse, Arthur orders Lucas to calm down and stop blaming himself. Then he comments to Brow that before continuing, he needs to make a decision to withdraw or move on. And if they decide to continue moving forward, you can't keep hiding things, because the worst thing in a dungeon is not trusting the leader. This audio confesses that he had lied when saying he explored that dungeon. He was just based on the information his client gave him. He comments that he has not yet paid the price for putting them in that situation, but begs them to let him continue, as it will probably be his last mission, and hopes to allow her to go until the end. Jasmine recommends aborting the mission. Samantha scolds her, because with her arm like that, it's impossible. Brain promises that it won't be a burden. However, given the situation, both trying to go back and forward is hell. So, in the end, Arthur agrees to continue. Brain guarantees that Mana Stone really exists. So, without further ado discussion, they decide to move on. Although before proceeding, Brown suggests that Arthur be the leader of the group. Despite all the unexpected situations, he always remained calm and handled everything in an appropriate way, admirable way. This makes him a natural leader. In the end, Arthur accepts further. Ahead, they arrive at a huge door. Browd warns him that as far as he knows, behind it is the deepest level. Without losing time, the boys open it. When they see a huge clearing above those caves, they ask themselves, what the hell is this place? Error 500. Server error. 1500. That's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. With this temperature, after walking for a while, the boys get lost. Quickly, Note realizes that they are seeing hallucinations. They see double doors or flowers that they had already seen before. They feel error 500. Server error 1500. That's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. To now retreat, including Yasmin. She then asks what the hell they are, saying and asks them to retrain. Meanwhile, Arthur realizes that the boys are falling into the desires that the mist gives them. See? At that moment, he ends up seeing his fiancée, Clara. Without thinking, he runs after her, commenting that he knew she hadn't died. Arthur asks him to stop, although he just ignores him and continue on your way. At that moment, a kind of vines begin to appear, although the boys don't notice it. He and Arthur are in charge of bringing them back to their senses. They ask Samantha to create a barrier to protect them from the mist. By covering themselves with it, the boys manage to regain clarity. Arthur asks Yasmin to open a path with her magic. Hesitate, she conjures a powerful typhoon, blowing away all the fog from her path. As she does so, the boys realize that they are being surrounded by some vines. Its turn, Brad ends up losing his mind, fighting imaginary mana beasts. When he sees the vines, he shouts that he doesn't think about losing against a plant. After all, he is a double-level enhancer. The detail is that he is out of his mind. Arthur is worried when he sees that Brad is losing his reason, so he orders Samantha to cover Lucas so that he can burn the plants without wasting time. Lucas uses his flames to incinerate them all. Unfortunately, his magic has no effect, and, as usual, he panics. Arthur orders Reginald and Elijah to cover the rear, while he and Yasmin will fight their way through. They advance, cutting the vines that cross their path. However, they regenerate very quickly, understanding that this way they will achieve nothing. Arthur cuts the vines with his swords wrapped in flames. He burns them completely, achieving a very effective attack. In turn, Jasmine uses her wind magic to cut the vines. Creepers too. Arthur makes it clear that he will be responsible for protecting everyone so that they return alive. Although I think Chris is already dead, Lucas just complains when he sees Arthur's talent. He takes charge to prevent BR from ending up with San Pedro. Unfortunately, Samantha is at the limit, so Lucas takes his place and uses his flames to burn all the vines. The fire spreads quickly. Arthur noticed that these branches are covered with water. Therefore, they cannot be burned completely. This means that their roots must be very deep, absorbing a large amount of water. Somewhere he asks Samantha to try to control the water from the vines. When she tries, she manages to stop the regeneration. However, she is very tired. So, Arthur reassures her before she falls. Sometime later, as they reorganize themselves, Arthur tells them that they need to go get Creel to get out of that place as quickly as possible. Although Lucas just complains, asking why leave if everything was going according to plan, he starts complaining about the fact that, supposedly, they are veteran adventurers. He just decided, participate because I believed they were good. This martyrdom? Lucas. Someday you will suffer, brother. Someday you will suffer. Jasmine approaches Reginald and asks who Clara is. Meanwhile, Arthur orders Lucas to keep quiet. Reginald tells Jasmine that Clara was Creel's fiancée. He explains that she was killed. In a dungeon, Creel's motivation for going to that place was to fulfill the dream he had had with her. He is his friend, so he also wanted to help him fulfill his dream, just like Brout. Unfortunately, at that moment, the fog begins to spread again. Arthur orders Lucas to use a more powerful fire to evaporate the water and slow down the regeneration of the vines. The boys counterattack, but just at that moment, a huge figure appears. Samantha falls in fear when he understands what they are facing. Jasmine mentions that she has only heard about these things in books, and that what they are facing now is the guardian spirit Elderwood, a rank S brawl monster, in turn, still out of your mind. The boys are shocked to see that Creo is trapped inside that monster. Without thinking, Brout advances against him, but with a simple blow, he is thrown away. Reginald also advances against the monster, covering himself in rock armor. Arthur shouts at him not to do that, because they are no match for that thing. And indeed, Reginald is also thrown away. In turn, Lucas does more than shake. As usual, Jasmine catches Arthur and tells him that they both need to leave that place, but he responds, "What will we do with the others?" She makes it clear that she already knows it's impossible save everyone. Arthur remembers that he promised promised that everyone would leave that place. However, Jasmine responds that she made a promise to her family and needs to keep it. Monster does and undoes like nothing. When seeing all the chaos, Arthur tells Jasmine that they will leave that place, but they won't do it alone. Without hesitation, he jumps to protect Samantha. He orders Elia to cover Brad, who is quite schizophrenic, and they can't leave him alone. The priority is to get out of that cave through the entrance. When covering him, Jasmine catches Brad and quickly avoids the vines. While Arthur understands that if they don't get rid of the main body, there is no point in cutting the vines, the detail is that the enormous amount of water flowing through that monster's body is impossible to stop. Extract with Samantha's magic. So, he resorts to calcining the monster, using his thunder magic. After connecting several consecutive blows, he manages to collapse it. He himself is impacted, but warns that this isn't over yet. In an instant, the vines reach Arthur. Lucas continues to complain that none of this should be happening. As the monster quickly begins to capture one by one all the boys, Arthur, desperate, shouts for Lucas to attack the vines with all his power, but this useless man is terrified. Before being sent with St. Peter, Arthur takes charge of protect him, but then runs to protect others. Meanwhile, Lucas begins to think that he is not like that. He is more noble than anyone and does not intend to die in that place. His look changes, and he advances towards Arthur, who, upon seeing his look, thinks he knows someone with a similar look. Lucas points his staff at him and says he needs to survive and become the wizard. Stronger. Since Arthur was willing to save everyone, he must sacrifice himself so that everyone can survive. Without hesitation, he attacks Arthur with his magic. Yasmi runs to protect him, but Lucas also attacks her. Just like Alade, he asks if they really thought that someone like him would risk his life for simple commoners. His life is worth much more than simple servants who will go down in history for having sacrificed themselves for him. Without mercy, he begins to destroy the cave to bury them in it. As he does this, he says that he will tell them that everyone was very brave and sacrificed themselves for him. They end up being captured. Although Brad jumps to the rescue, cutting the vines and the monster in half, unfortunately his heroism doesn't last long. He ends up being stabbed. In turn, Arthur's mask falls. When observing the situation, he notices how Lucas's trash is running away with a smile. When he sees that he has no choice left, he decides to use his secret weapon. Although he still hasn't mastered it, and even Birion, although it took decades to learn it, Arthur uses bestialization, thus obtaining the power of his beast. From afar, Sylvie feels its power. While Arthur is unsure if he will survive after using this power, he promised that he would save everyone, so he will do it without hesitation. He releases his power, freezing everything around him to absolute zero. Then, he hits the monster, destroying it in just half an action. Meanwhile, Elijah can't believe all the power he possesses. Unfortunately, when defeated, the monster causes the cave to collapse. Afterwards, we see Lucas leaving the cave and saying that the group was annihilated. Then, the scene changes to Arthur's parents. A sign on Elife's ring says that Arthur is in danger. However, Reynolds says that everything will be fine because he is with Jasmine. Back in the cave, we see Elijah trying to wake up. Note: when Note wakes up, he asks Elijah to use one of the stones from his glove on him. Elijah does so. After this, Arthur remembers everything that happened and immediately becomes furious with Lucas for abandoning everyone. Concerned, he asks Elijah if Jasmine is okay. Elijah replies that she is alive, but suffered a lot of damage because her body was not protected by mana when she was hit by the magic. He explains that he was only able to provide first aid, but that wouldn't be enough to keep her alive for a long time. Then, Arthur asks Elijah to use one of the glove's magical stones on her as well. Elijah agrees, and upon using the stone, Jasmine's breathing finally stops, stabilizes. Then Elijah asks how Arthur is feeling, and he responds that he is much better. Elijah then comments that he was surprised to find out that the masked swordsman who participated of the exam with him, he was practically the same age. Arthur realizes that he is without his mask. Elijah explains that he couldn't find it after the collapse. Arthur then asks about his sword and the black staff. Elijah reveals that he managed to save them before they were buried. Arthur sincerely thanks him for saving both his and Jasmine's lives, saying that Elijah could have simply run away alone. Elijah responds that he is not like that bastard Lucas. He states that he will never forgive that elf for what he did. While they talk, Elijah asks why Arthur didn't run away when the guardian spirit appeared. Jasmine would probably be able to help him escape. Arthur calmly responds that a king never abandons his people, getting a laugh from Elijah. Arthur then reveals that made a promise to never abandon someone important to him. After that, Arthur says that until Jasmine fully recovers, they can't do anything but wait. Then he decides to tell Elijah his real name and officially introduces himself. Observing the place where they were hiding, Arthur realizes that metallic shelter, It didn't seem natural. He asks if it was Elijah who created it. Elijah explains that when the cave collapsed, he used magic to create that metal shelter. Arthur is impressed, saying that even an extremely talented wizard wouldn't be able to create metal out of thin air. He asks if Elijah would be a dwarf. Elijah responds that not even he knows for sure. He says that he grew up in the kingdom of Dalve, but that the old man who raised him never revealed anything about his real parents, his childhood. Memories are just confusing fragments that he can't fully understand. Elijah says who led an ordinary life until reaching the dark orange level. At that moment, a strange energy took over his body, making him faint. When he woke up, he was surrounded by metallic objects black. It was then that the Lord of Dalf said that the time had come for him to leave the kingdom and travel the world. Elijah also comments that, from time to time, he continues to feel that strange energy inside him and believes that it is linked to his special abilities. Arthur comments that the two seem to have been through very difficult situations. Then, Elijah asks what exactly happened. During the fight against the Guardian, Arthur used a technique that Elijah had never seen before. He decided to reveal the truth. He explained that it was an enlarger capable of manipulating the 4 elements, as well as of possessing the very rare attributes of ice and lightning. Elijah was completely shocked by the revelation, but he soon commented that the mark that appeared on Arthur's body and the change in hair color did not seem to be part of these elemental magics. Then, Arthur revealed another even greater secret. He was also a beast tamer. What Elijah saw during the battle was the release of will of the beast. Elijah was even more surprised and asked how old Arthur really was to have so many absurd abilities. Arthur took another magic stone and used it on Jasmine. Finally, after all that suffering, she slowly began to open her eyes. She threw herself at Arthur, apologizing for not being able to protect him, but Arthur said it was okay. Elijah then made the cave, and they left. Arthur asked him if anyone else survived. He commented that Reginald and Broad were already dead when he defeated the Guardian. Then Arthur asks about Samantha. He already says that just before he collapsed, he managed to wrap her in a shelter, but she seemed quite weak. Elijah then uses his magic to look for her, Samantha. A little later, he manages to find her. When they arrive at the place, Arthur finds her mask. Elijah undoes the shelter, and inside, he finds Samantha still alive. Elijah thinks about using magic to get the vines off his leg, but Arthur says they're in no condition. The place starts to collapse, and they run. When they get to the door, it's covered in ice. Elijah has no more mana to remove it. Then, Arthur wakes up with his sword. They enter the cave and start going back. Halfway there, some mana beasts appear and they hide, while they continue heading towards on the way out. As they are running, Jasmine notices that the place is getting wet. Arthur thinks that if there was enough water to keep that Guardian, they are screwed. At that moment, the water starts rising very quickly, but thanks to a magical device, they manage to keep breathing underwater and end up being dragged by the current. A while later, Arthur wakes up and screams for Jasmine. She appears right behind him along with the others. However, several mana beasts appear at the scene. They prepare to fight and manage to resist for a while. Good time, fighting back against various magical beasts and mana beasts. However, after a while, Elijah runs out of mana, and Jasmine is completely tired. Arthur continues to fight alone. He realizes that he is not. He will be able to handle all that. He thinks that, once again, he will not be able to protect what is important to him. When he is already exhausted, several mana beasts attack Arthur at once. However, a second before her end comes, the ceiling collapses. Then, we see Silvio, who went there to save Arthur. She is much bigger. Elijah panics when he sees her. He wonders if that is a wyvern, but when he notices that it has 4 legs, he understands that it is a dragon. He thinks he must be hallucinating, but Arthur confirms that it really is a dragon. Arthur explains that, supposedly, dragons have been extinct for centuries. Precisely for this reason, he asks Elijah to keep their existence a secret. Elijah is already completely surprised. Upon discovering that Arthur, at just 11 years old, can manipulate the 4 elements, in addition to 2 special attributes, and to make things even worse, he has a dragon as a companion. Even so, Arthur reaches out to Elijah and asks him to accompany them. Without wasting time, Silvio takes charge of getting them out of that cave once and for all. As soon as they finally arrive outside, Samantha wakes up and comments to Arthur that he looks quite handsome without the mask. Arthur is excited to see her awake, but recommends that she keep her strength. Still, Samantha stands up to show that he has the core of Elderwood. Arthur is surprised and comments that when everything calms down, they will share the profits. However, Samantha responds that doesn't want anything, because she believes he should have everything. She insists on this, and Arthur asks if she's sure, since that nucleus is worth a fortune. Samantha responds that it's just staying alive thanks to him, so he considers it completely fair that Arthur gets the reward. In the end, Arthur accepts and thanks him. After that, Jasmine leaves to look for some drinking water. The other three rest. At that moment, Silvio says that he hunted several mana beasts and devoured their cores. Arthur, a little worried, he asks if she can return to her original form. Silvio does so quickly, leaving Arthur quite relieved, as this way she won't cause confusion in the city. So Arthur sends a letter to parents to let them know that they are fine and that they don't need to worry. Upon arriving at the guild, the boys receive medical treatment. Sometime later, the guild master receives an unexpected visit of someone he also can't remember who he is. He comments that he read the manga, but doesn't remember the person. However, based on his appearance and eyes, he believes he is someone from the Flamesworth family. While everyone recovers, the guild master meets with Arthur to ask if he knew that the dungeon raid was not authorized by the guild, complaint holding the group responsible for everything that happened. Now, the guild's disciplinary committee will meet to decide what their punishment will be. Finally, he reveals that the whistleblower was Lucas Wicks. Afterwards, guild members visited the Elder Forest chamber. They recovered Brode's body and Reginald's belongings. Samantha survived, but was so seriously injured that even after being cured, she would no longer be able to continue as an adventurer. Later, it became clear that that mission had not been organized by the guild. Arthur could not stop thinking about how Reginald and Browdy died. Now everyone would be called to testify about what happened in the dungeon. Shortly after, he receives a letter from his mother who thanks him for getting in touch. She tells him that his ring alerted her that he was in danger. She was so worried that she didn't know what else to do. Now that she knows he's okay, Arthur manages to calm down a little. However, soon after, he meets Lucas, who speaks to him casually, as if nothing had happened. Lucas says that Arthur has the devil's luck to have survived. Arthur simply ignores him and walks straight past without say a word, entering Caspian's office. Lucas doesn't react and decides to leave, telling his guards that he has a job for them. When Caspian sees Arthur, he asks him to sit down and goes straight to the point, asking exactly what happened in the dungeon. I'd like to hear your side of the story. As Arthur begins to explain everything, Jasmine wakes up in the infirmary. She immediately looks for him. She only finds a woman from the guild in the hallway, who informs that Arthur is talking to Caspian at that moment. Without hesitation, Jasmine runs to see them too, but the woman stops her and explains that she doesn't need to go because she isn't being held responsible for what happened. Meanwhile, Arthur tells Caspian that after being attacked by a giant worm, he lost an arm. He was named leader of the group. Caspian then explains that, according to Lucas's testimony, during the battle against the Elder Woods, Arthur would have used Reginald as a distraction to escape with Jasmine. Supposedly, Lucas would also be sacrificed, but managed to escape alone. Caspian makes it clear that he understands that this is just Lucas's claim, and that he also intends to talk to Elijah about what happened. As they talk, Jasmine runs through the forest to find Sunil, wanting to know if his father told him what happened. Sunil just asks if she is okay. It seems like she has been through a lot, and clearly she is still recovering. Jasmine confirms that she is fine. Sunil responds that he is happy that she has made good friends, including the twin horns, Arthur and Elijah. After that, he asks that Jasmine take care of herself before you leave. Meanwhile, Lucas finds Elijah and comments that he seems to be doing well enough, which means that Caspian will also interrogate him. Samantha is too incapacitated to speak. Jasmine, being a Flamesworth, does not need to testify. This leaves only Elijah. Lucas then warns him that he needs to state that Note was responsible for the death from Broad and the others. Elijah immediately asks if he has gone crazy, making it clear that he would never agree to that. Lucas then says that he hates doing that, but that he will have to make sure Elijah can speak. Just like Samantha, Lucas's guards immediately draw their swords and rush Elijah without hesitation, forcing him to defend himself against 4 men. Elijah fights at his best possible, but soon begins to be overwhelmed. However, before the situation can worsen further, the guards suddenly freeze in place. Noticing that something seems different, Lucas doesn't understand anything. He just complains, asking what they are doing. Just then, a sharp sword flies past his head, cutting his ear. The sword is stuck in the tree right behind him. Lucas freezes when he sees Arthur looking at him, surrounded by a terrifying aura. Nervous, he orders his guards to do something. Remember how much you pay them. Despite the screams, the guards are completely unable to move, so Lucas just remains there, overcome by fear. While the blood drips from his ear, Arthur approaches slowly. Without saying a word, Arthur creates a fireball in his hand. However, Caspian quickly arrives and stops him, saying that he needs to let the investigation take its course. Arthur simply stops, calmly retrieves his sword from the tree and claims that his hand just slipped. Lucas remains completely terrified and leaves with his guards as soon as Caspian orders him to seek treatment in the infirmary. When they are alone, Caspian tells Arthur that he needs to understand the situation he is in. That kind of provocation is not wise. Arthur responds that he doesn't understand why he shouldn't act that way. Since he has enough power to erase Lucas from existence, the Wicks don't even know his true identity. Of course, to him, it looks like Caspian is trying to convince him to let Lucas get away with it. Then, Arthur asks with a frightening expression if Caspian really believes he is strong enough to protect Lucas from him. Caspian clearly feels intimidated by that intense look. He even wonders how many beasts Arthur has killed, or even if he has killed people. Arthur's still waiting for an answer. So Caspian clarifies that he is doing it for his own good. Believe it, Arthur or not. After all, even if the Wicks don't know who he is, if something happens to him, Lucas, they will act. They will probably go after not only Jasmine, but also the current and former members of the Twin Horns. Therefore, Caspian advises Arthur to avoid any extreme action until possess strength enough to protect everyone he cares about. Later, Arthur and Lucas appear before the Adventurers Guild delegation. The president declares that the responsibility for entering the Tomb of Terror without the Guild's authorization, as well as for the multiple deaths in the battle against the Elderwoods, it falls to Note Wargmentor based on the allegations of Lucas Wykes. With the death of the group's original leader, Roald Leyden, there is now a discrepancy between the testimonies of Lucas Wykes, Note Wargmentor, and Elijah Knight. In light of this, and after debating the matter with this delegation representing the Adventurers Guild, the president officially announces the conclusions of the investigation. He declares that Lucas White will be stripped of his position as an A-rank spellcaster. Furthermore, he is prohibited from re-registering as an adventurer until the guild deems it appropriate. Lucas just smiles, because that was exactly the punishment he expected. He's sure that his father will find a way for him to get the permit again. Shortly, the president asks him to hand over his adventurer's license. Lucas obeys without difficulty. Knowing that soon will join the academy and won't need it for some time, Arthur clearly realizes that the punishment is nothing more than an act, but he remains silent until the president turns his attention to him. The old man stares at him for a moment, questioning if this really is the boy he defeated alone, an S-class mana beast. He then declares that, due to Arthur's clear animosity towards the accuser and the entire Wicks family, he will enforce the following penalties on behalf of the Guild of Adventurers. First, while Lucas is attending the Zyros Academy, Arthur will be prohibited from entering its premises. Arthur immediately protests, saying that he cannot accept that, because Lucas was the one who betrayed the entire group, and in fact, he shouldn't even be punished in that mild way. The president interrupts him and clarifies that the decision has already been made. There is no room for discussion. On the contrary, he should consider himself lucky that they didn't confiscate his adventurer's license, as they took into consideration the circumstances of the case. Of Lucas and the Wicks family, he will be able to continue his career normally. Lucas makes no effort to hide his satisfied smile when he hears that, believing that Arthur is finally finished. Although, when the president states that this closes the matter, Lucas immediately protests. He asks if they will not reveal the identity of Note. One of the members of the delegation explains that the identity of Note will be recorded after the investigation is closed, but this information will not be released publicly to protect both him and his family. Any future supervision, regardless of your masked identity, you will be treated by wizards chosen by the guild. Lucas still tries to insist once again, but the president interrupts him again and reminds him that this is a definitive decision. No room for debate. This officially ends the investigation. Shortly afterwards, Lucas's servants appear to inform him that his father demands his presence immediately. Before leaving, Lucas warns Arthur that he should stay at least 5 cities away if he knows what's good for him. Arthur just calls him a brat and says that trying to appear threatening while running away is simply pathetic. The comment infuriates Lucas even more, but he has no more time to stay there and leaves, carrying that bitter feeling before Arthur leaves too. The president stops him. He asks him to accompany him, as he will show him the way out of the funds. When they are alone, the president sighs and asks if that farce was enough to satisfy him. Arthur admits that his performance was quite convincing and thanks him for his cooperation. The old man replies that he doesn't need to thank him, clarifying that he didn't do that for Arthur. He just hopes that he doesn't cause any harm. More problems. Even so, he comments that he doesn't understand why. Arthur believes he will be able to hide his secret from the family for a long time. Arthur calmly responds that he is much more cautious than what it looks like. so that won't be a problem. The president simply pulls a book from the shelf, revealing a secret passage. He comments that perhaps there will come a day when he will need a favor from him. Arthur admits that he seems wise enough to know whose side he will take when that moment comes, but he says he will remember it. The president just watches Arthur leave, realizing that Caspian he was right. Arthur really is a scary thing. Arthur knows that in the end, Lucas ended up acting exactly as he expected from a Wix, but still, he's sad that he exists now. That break between them. Excited, she asks if everything is finally over and if they can now go home. Arthur manages to catch his breath and replies that everything is resolved. So, you can now leave. Jasmine and Elijah were also waiting for him outside. The three of them head together towards the gates. A sad expression. Elijah comments that once they cross those gates, each one will follow a different path. At that moment, Arthur remembers that Elijah is not from Sapim and says that, if he is not busy, he could stay with them until classes start. Eladia clarifies that he does not intend to study at that academy, but Arthur remembers that he himself had already said that one of the reasons for working so hard as an adventurer was to gain notoriety and fame. Study at Zeros Academy would only help with that. Claudia asks if Arthur really believes that the best magical academy on the continent would accept someone like him. Maybe he can even pass the entrance exam, but he would still need a huge amount of money and connections to actually get in. Arthur puts his arm around his shoulders, and he claims he can take care of that part. So, Eladia just needs to attend classes while he solves the rest. Eladia complains that she can't breathe, making Arthur quickly release her. So, clarifies that he hasn't accepted the proposal yet. Arthur continues trying to convince her and remembers that Lucas will also study there. He doesn't care what happens when the two are together. This really makes Eladia think about it. But before she can respond, Arthur asks Jasmine to accompany him home because there is something he needs to resolve immediately. Jasmine accepts without hesitation. Difficulty. After the two leave, Caspian appears out of nowhere and comments that he is happy to see that Arthur was cautious enough to let them leave without accompanying him. Arthur just responds, who was also pleased that Caspian had agreed to cooperate with his little plan, so Lucas won't suspect anything for quite a while. For a brief moment, the story jumps back in time to show what happened when Arthur finally decided to get straight to the point and talk to Caspian before all that theatrics, Arthur clarifies, who also wanted to ask Caspian something. He knows that he is intelligent enough to realize that helping him would be in the interests of both the guild and himself. Caspian is easily convinced by the proposal and responds that the guild will be happy to help him in any way they can. Arthur thanks him and says he is happy that they were able to reach an understanding. Back in the present, Caspian decides to deliver. He gives Arthur a bag full of money, saying that it is a farewell gift. He asks Arthur to use the money to take some preventive measures, ensuring that he can protect himself from here forward. Arthur is a little surprised by that, because Dom's sword shouldn't pose any problem. Instead of him not drawing it, what really worries him is the fact that Lucas having already seen Sylvia before. At that moment, Sylvia suddenly changes her appearance, making Arthur wonder how many different forms she still has. That ends up being extremely convenient. With this problem resolved, Arthur decides to take off his mask and go shopping. He visits the store he had seen previously and informs the salesman that his father sent him to buy a ring, dimensional, that would serve. On his thumb, the man warns that something like this wouldn't come cheap, but immediately, he is shocked. He falls silent when Arthur shows the bag full of money. Arthur finally manages to buy the ring, although he feels a small pain in his heart when he realizes that almost all of his gold coins were spent on this. When he finally gets home, Eleanor welcomes him with a hug, accompanied by tears. She says she was very worried. His parents are also happy to see him. Well, Alice comments that she is happy that he returned home safely. Arthur responds with a smile and apologizes for making her worry all the time. The warm meeting ends up being interrupted by Vincent, who apologizes and says that they also expected to receive the own son back home. Everyone decides to have a meal while they talk. When he asks about Lilia, Vincent replies excitedly that she is already at the gym. Zeros changes the subject and admits that she was shocked to hear that Arthur defeated Elder Woods' guardian. Spirit, Reynolds comments that Arthur must be even stronger now and then confesses that he was stuck in the internship Deep Orange since leaving home. He has tried to meditate and purify his soul on numerous occasions, but he has failed to make any progress. Arthur so decides to give him the mana core of the beast from the Elder Woods, asks him to try use it because he believes that it can help him overcome the block that prevents him from reaching the next stage. He himself has already reached the light orange stage. Both Vincent and Tabitha have not. They manage to hide their shock upon hearing this. Reynolds finally decides to accept the mana core. Although he asks Arthur not to sulk the next time they train together, Arthur happily accepts the deal, hoping that the Elder Woods mana core will help his father become even stronger than he already is. Meanwhile, we see the mysterious man from before exploring the Elder Woods cave. After everything that happened,